Okay. Hate it.
We're live now?
We're here. We're here. Okay.
We're here. Okay,
Everything's good.
perfect. Everything is great. Okay. So another TROM-Cast. Last week we didn't do any TROM-Cast, but we were kind of the past TROM-Cast discussing about this epidemic, and how it impacts people all around the world. And we said that we should give it a break a bit because we already had like 3 TROM-Casts about that. But today we are going to discuss about something that's quite related to this pandemic. Because basically, if you look around the world, people are not only panicked about the disease itself that may kill people and so forth, but now they're panicked about this thing that they call as economy, And basically, what that is now people have to stay at home, don't go out and work and do stuff, so they're not paid, and because of that, they don't have the money to pay their rents, they don't have the money to pay for food and so forth. So it's a bit of a bizarre situation, because if you look at like we have stuff, we have lots of apartments, we have lots of food, we have lots of stuff already. Just a problem of how people can get to those things, And like we call it a TROM, we describe it as like people have to trade their energy and skills and attention and data to get something in return. We just put some money on top of that, to pay people to be like a medium between people and stuff. So because of that, we are thinking to discuss about a universal basic income today. And because even here in Spain, I live in Spain, and the government was thinking how to get out of this mess, just in a quick way. And they kind of proposed something like a basic income guarantee, something like give people 400, 500 euros a month for, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe more. So they are discussing this kind of idea. And to go deeper into what the universal basic income is and how it can maybe help or not, we'll see the current situation or in the future, our society. We have a guest today, Scott, and Scott is, I think you got pretty involved with this universal basic income for the past several years. I think I remember you since I was working with TVP and I made the TV magazine, and I think we got a bit in contact over email or something, I remember. So Scott also knows about like the Venus Project and Zeitgeist movements and so forth. And now I think you are quite a loud voice, let's say, in the universal basic income scheme. So Scott, if you can tell us what's universal basic income, and how did you get involved with this idea? Why do you consider its interest or important?
Yeah, I actually got into this idea back in 2013. And it was actually through the idea of a resource-based economy. I considered myself to be part of the Zeitgeist movement. I was very interested in Jacques Fresco's writings, and I even had read a bunch of books that he had recommended. So I was very informed by that line of thinking, and it was interesting how I would tell other people about it, but there was always like this barrier of like how to get there. Mm-hmm. And it was after reading this book in 2013 called Manna by Marshall Brain, where it's kind of imagines automation, and it creates this kind of dystopia, and it's a very realistic dystopia as far as like if we continue going the route that we're going down, making the same decisions that we're making. And then the second half of the book was like this: what if we made technology actually work for all of us, and actually created this kind of new economy, and kind of went in the Star Trek direction. And it was then that I connected. It was like, hey, this is actually how we'd get there, because Marshall Brain, the author, actually was advocating for this tool to get there, of this basic income. And when I started researching it and learning about the history, learning about the evidence and everything, I just reached the conclusion that like this is actually the most realistic means of transitioning to this new kind of economy, this new way of thinking, this decoupling of the importance of income for our existence by actually just making sure that we actually all have enough income sufficient for existence, where we could actually kind of get past this this monetary system possibly. And yeah, that was back in 2013. And just for those who don't know too, especially if we're having this conversation about what's happening in Spain and other countries, some people are using the language of basic income to describe policies that aren't really basic income. So just to clarify, a basic income, the elements are it's unconditional, so it's provided to everyone, rich or poor, working or not working. It's fully universal. It goes to everyone as individuals. It doesn't go to the household. It goes to everyone as individuals, and it's a regular amount of money that you can depend upon and know that's always going to be there, let's say weekly or monthly or whatever for the rest of your life. And those are the important elements of a basic income. And I really want to stress too that's the unconditionality that is key. If you try to target only say the most deserving or the poor or something, then that's not a basic income. You can actually create poverty traps by building that. You can create stigma by dividing people into the deserving and undeserving. So I think that's key. But it's really interesting too to see countries around the world actually come to this conclusion, at least at a temporary basis, of thinking like, okay, well, we have the goods and services. It's out there at least, their basic stuff. People need to eat. People need to pay for their rent. Let's just make sure that they have the money to actually do that to continue.
And I was thinking like that's the part that many people may get it wrong when they take this universal basic income in this pure form and try to muddy it, like to put like a lot of things that are not unconditional and say we only give you, that's in Spain they were talking about something like we give for people who make less than 250 euros a month, like who makes 250 euros a month, and as soon as you put these rules, like you said, it's going to be a lot more difficult for people to get it, a lot more bureaucracy, you put you don't help them probably, because you make it too convoluted. There are all kinds, right, of welfare systems around the world that give money, right, to poor people, but that's very different, the universal basic income.
Yeah, and you can end up with these really strange results and very problematic. So like, let's say, and this is actually from Spain, if I remember the numbers correctly, and again, it's not like set in stone, but part of the discussion was like saying, let's give 400 euros to those who are earning less than 200 euros a month. And it's like, okay, so you lift the people who are earning, say, 200 euros to 600 euros. And then the people who are earning 300 euros get nothing. So they're still at 300. And then, so now they're below the other people. And you're seeing that too, like in the US, where we set up this unemployment system where everyone's getting an extra $600 per week on top of their existing unemployment insurance income. And so there we've created this system where it's like we've divided the country into, the work that is essential and non-essential. And you've got this situation now where people who are considered non-essential are earning higher incomes than those we consider essential because they're still working and don't get this unemployment boost. And it's just, you look at that kind of system and it's like, this doesn't make any sense at all. If anything, the people who are considered essential should be basically getting a boost and be, getting hazard pay for what they're doing. It's obviously extremely important to be considered doing essential work. So if we had this floor underneath everybody, then if you're unemployed, you would fall to that floor, which would hopefully be sufficiently high enough right now. And if you're still working, then you're earning on top of that floor, and now you're doing better than, income-wise as far as everybody else. And that would recognize the fact that you are doing essential work right now. So it makes sense in that regard too, especially in this instance.
Mm-hmm. And this is not a new idea, right? I think people were talking about universal basic income for many years, since the 50s or more than that.
Oh yeah, even earlier than that. This can go. There's a debate even about how far back it goes to, because like there's kind of different kind of versions and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I really like Thomas Paine's argument back, over 200 years ago here in the U.S. And it was just that he was he looked at the world and he said, okay, well, it's a position that cannot be controverted, that, you know, the earth in its natural state belong to, you know, all of humanity. And so here we are, we're building stuff out of it. We're creating these, you know, whatever we create out of these natural resources. And people should, like, you know, should own, you know, some of that. It should be recognized that they're adding value to this stuff. But at the same time, they did not create the earth. So essentially everybody should owe to society this, what he called a ground rent on these resources. And so, you know, essentially we should be making sure that everyone gets their, what he referred to as a natural inheritance. And his plan actually called for everyone receiving this same amount of money at turning the age of 21. And in the belief that if everybody started with something and they're seen as, you know, it was everyone got the same thing, rich or poor, then you wouldn't have the stigma. And also, if you had something to start off with, then you would be less likely to, say, fall into poverty. It didn't make any sense to him that we would only, say, try to help people after they fall into poverty. It just makes more sense to actually prevent it in the first place. And so, yeah, that was over 200 years ago, that thinking. And I think that thinking is still, you know, entirely solid. And, you know, I wish more people understood it even today. It's still just as true now.
Because in a way, it's like universal basic income for those who know about TROM. It's almost like giving money trade-free in a way. Like you give money $1,000 a month. In a sense, it's like you don't have to do anything for that money. That's the idea that I'm pretty much okay with. I'm thinking that it's much better than whatever welfare systems they have in place. Because of course they would say, if you're just a citizen of our, like you give for the US people, if you give them €1,000 money a month, then you have to be a citizen and so forth. And some people have all kinds of questions like, well, wouldn't that make others want to obtain that citizenship or no, or migrate there and so forth? So there are lots of questions around this idea, and I've read a lot on your blog. I will ask you more in the meantime. But if anyone else has questions, you can ask. Yeah. So yeah.
So everybody, no matter how wealthy they are, will get a certain amount of money.
Yeah. So it's the same starting point for everyone. It's this floor that operates underneath everybody. At the same time, most UBI systems are tax funded. Or at least, you know, there's some way of paying for it. And when you do that too, then you're always going to have your net receivers and your net payers. So yeah, let's say Bill Gates will receive a basic income just like everybody else, except also in order to create the basic income, Bill Gates will be paying more into the system than he is receiving out of it. His taxes will go up by more than, say, $12,000 per year.
Okay.
So he's essentially paying for his own basic income. And if you see, it's the net distribution that really matters. Any UBI system, you can imagine there's a point of neutrality where someone, let's say it's usually around the top 80 or 90%, where that person is paying new taxes of $12,000 a year to receive $12,000 if that's the amount. And then therefore the net is zero. They're no better off, they're no worse off. They're paying for their own basic income. That may confuse people, and it often does, like saying, well, why are we paying people only to get it back from them? But it really does make a whole lot of sense as far as the efficiency goes. You want to make sure that you don't make any mistakes in the calculation. You want to make sure that everybody has, you know, what they need. And it's really hard to determine need without any errors. It's easy to draw that line and end up messing up, and someone actually needed something, didn't get it. And also because of income variability on month-to-month basis, if you're like varying the amount depending on what people are earning, then you can easily, say, underestimate or overestimate, and people will, again, not get what they need. And then there's the process itself, the bureaucratic mechanism of the calculation to make sure, okay, along every single person, do they qualify and how much did they get? And instead, we already do that process come tax time. In every country around the world, you pay taxes. So instead of instead of altering the amount of money at the onset and then altering the amount of tax at the end, just give everyone the same amount and then only do that one calculation at the end. And then so that way you're saving that efficiency and you're the errors and the people that could potentially, not get something that they need.
Because that's another question that people have, like, how do you pay basically for this? How do you get the money from one side to the other without, they say, messing up the economy? So basically what you're proposing is the money is not going to be invented, but they are going to be extracted from the same economy using different kinds of tax schemes. Something like that.
Yeah, usually. And so I would even not exclude the potential, especially right now, of just creating money to pay for a basic income. But when it comes to most permanent basic incomes, you're talking about some kind of, fiscal taxation mechanisms. And, you can be looking at income tax, or you could be looking at consumption taxes like a VAT. You can be looking at wealth taxes, or you could be looking at like the way Alaska does it, with essentially a dividend on resources. There's also tax reform itself. So, there's right now, it's like we see that when it comes to, say, welfare systems, government assistance systems, that only, say, the poor get it. But really, it's not true. We actually have welfare systems for the middle class and the upper classes everywhere too. We just don't call them welfare. We actually, the technical term for them would be tax expenditures. So that's subsidies, tax credits, tax allowances, tax deductions, and those can be very large and very numerous. In the U.S., we actually do $1.5 trillion of tax expenditures every year. And 17% of those go to the top 1%. So when it comes to like these tax expenditures, they're extremely inequitable and they're mostly targeted to the rich. And so I think it makes far more sense to just say, hey, if a millionaire is getting $30,000 a year in tax expenditures, let's not do that and instead just give them $12,000 like everybody else. Like that would actually raise money to do this, and it would be far more equitable. And also they would realize that they too get something. Because right now, if you're rich and you're getting a tax expenditure, it's like you think of it as your money, even though that it is the rest of society enabling you to lower your taxes through this system. And it's that invisibility, I think, actually helps people think that they're disconnected from the rest of society. If everybody saw that they are receiving the same thing, I think that would greatly increase social cohesion itself. And also when it comes to cost, I want to make sure that the people understand that poverty isn't free. It's not free to not have a basic income, but by not providing the sufficient amount of resources to people and not providing that security in knowing that they're going to have that they don't have to worry about that leads to this chronic stress. All this actually has extremely expensive consequences when it comes to, say, health, when it comes to crime. The costs of child poverty alone are over $1 trillion a year in the U.S. And if you look at, say, the net cost of basic income, then that already exceeds it. It costs less to implement a basic income in any country than it does to not have it because of the cost of poverty being so extremely expensive.
What is exactly the cost of poverty?
Yeah.
Like in the real sense, what is that? What do you mean by the cost of poverty?
Yeah, so as an example, there's something called the social determinants of health, and it's 80 to 90% of health outcomes are related to the social environment and not from medical interventions and assistance there. So let's say a lot of people will get diabetes because of diabetes is greatly a disease of poverty and inequality and insecurity. That is an expensive disease that afflicts people essentially because they have a lack of economic security. In Dauphin, Manitoba, in the late 1970s, when in the town of Dauphin, they essentially eliminated poverty through a negative income tax version of a basic income guarantee. There was an 8.5% reduction in hospitalization rates, and that was through a reduction of stress, is what they found. So, and we've seen this elsewhere in other basic income experiments too, where it improves health. Like one of the results is that people will, say, improve their diets. They will, let's say, buy a lot more fresh fruits and vegetables, whereas before they couldn't really afford to do that. It's actually, it costs more money to really, say, eat healthier. And people want to eat healthier, they just really can't afford it. So we know that we could save a lot of money that any country with a universal healthcare system is spending more than it needs on healthcare than it would if it had a basic income system in place, because then people would be healthier and not need to use as much medical care as they would otherwise. And same with crime. In Namibia, in the basic income experiment there, crime was reduced by over 42%.
Wow.
So actually a very specific type of crime there, which was illegal hunting or poaching, was reduced by 95%. So you know that there are certain crimes and certain things that people do essentially because they feel that they have no choice but to do that. And besides doing those crimes initially, we have a system that punishes people for going into the system, especially in the US. Our recidivism rates are just insanely high, where people get out of prison and then, how do you get a job? You have to check the box that says you're a felon, and then you don't get hired anywhere. And so you can't earn any money. And so then you have to turn to earning money in whoever you can, which means crime, which means going back to prison. And it does that make sense to spend, say, $60,000 a year on somebody to keep them in prison, when if they just had $12,000 a year, they wouldn't be in prison at all? And so there's a lot of things in our society where we're paying so much more for someone to not make sure that they have that money that they need, and essentially to punish them for not having that money.
Yeah, in a sense, it's like discovering that water is wet. Because, of course, if you give people access to food and their basic necessities, be it through universal basic income or otherwise, of course, you will reduce the crime. Of course, people will be more healthy and so forth. So this universal basic income is just a mean to easily connect people with resources, right? Because some will ask, why do you see it's a better advantage than just providing people with resources directly rather than giving money? Is that better, giving money rather than giving resources to people?
Yeah, so we have a system of resource allocation based on money. And so a dollar given to someone, that dollar means that they can use it on whatever resources that they feel is most important to them. And I think that's the key feature, is that as long as we have a monetary system, then money is what enables people, it's the freedom to decide what it is that they want to use. By trying to determine what people need, then you're not able to successfully do that. You can do that for some people, but it doesn't help everybody. So let's for example, let's look at, say, the difference between food vouchers and cash. So like people think, oh yeah, food stamps, that's better because people can just use that in the food, and then they're not going to use it like on drugs or anything I don't want them to use that on. They're going to use it on food alone. Okay, great. Let's assume that that's true, and let's also realize that not everyone has the same diet. Like some people need certain foods and they can't eat certain other foods, and then so if you limit them to a voucher, then maybe they're not going to be able to obtain those foods. Maybe, and it's especially true if you're trying to give people food itself instead of vouchers to buy food. That's even worse. So like it's in this system, in this circumstance that we're in right now, it's just crazy how food banks are just being absolutely overwhelmed. they were never prepared for something like this. There 10,000 people can be in giant miles worth of lines of cars waiting for food, and you're just going to get what you can get. And at the same time, we've got stores that is the most efficient way of getting food to people, and people are just not able to go to those stores to buy the food. Instead, they're having to line up for what the food that they can get, and that might not be good for them. It's going to be food that they can't possibly eat. Maybe they need have a certain diet, and they can't have like gluten or things like that. So if you just make sure that they have cash, then they can determine for themselves what they need, and it might not even be food. At least in it to the degree that they're being told that they need it. Like, let's say if there are lots of instances where in the U.S. where, let's say, someone has food stamps, they have that assistance, but what they really need is they're short like $50 for rent. And so then what do? Well, then maybe something that they have to do is to sell those vouchers, and let's say they'll sell $100 worth of vouchers to get $50. And now they can get that for rent, but in doing so, they also broke the law and could possibly be punished for that. And also, they lost $50. They lost half of it in order to trade. So it can be really inefficient to go about that, when really we just want to make sure that people can decide for themselves what they need and enable that.
And what do you think? Like, because I was reading about your answer on that, and I agree that it seems, at least in this society right now, it seems easier to just give people money. And they go buy whatever they think that they need or they want. I was thinking also, like, what's the difference here between let's think about the healthcare system. Would that be like here in Spain? Basically it's the other way around. They give you the healthcare system. You don't have to pay for it, okay? But in US, you have to pay for the healthcare system. Would that apply there too, or is it like if you give people $1,000 or so a month, and they have to manage their own health and pay for their own surgeries and so forth? Could that be unsustainable when it comes to such a service that's very essential, like healthcare?
Yeah, so I look at basic income as this foundation. What you're doing is you're saying that every person has this minimum unlimited access to basic resources, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that they get. It's just you have that foundation, and then you build walls on top of that foundation in order to have like a solid, successful structure. And when it comes to those walls, I think that the universal healthcare systems are part of that. So you have that foundation, and then you build on top of it with the healthcare. And like I said before, you know that the UBI is that foundation because of the fact that 80% is from the social determinants of health. So you want to make sure that you are not treating what you wouldn't need to otherwise treat, but you still need to make sure that the way that you treat people having healthcare is the most efficient way possible. And I think that is through national systems. I don't think that the for-profit healthcare system works. It's never going to be a true market, because people are essentially willing to spend anything they can in order to stay alive. And there's also all sorts of market failures in it as well. So I personally don't think that the way to go about a universal healthcare system is through providing money to people or even vouchers for health insurance. I think that a universal healthcare system makes far more sense to be built on top of basic income. And there are other systems as well that make sense. So national education systems, I think, also should exist on top of basic income. And again, that money goes further. As an example of that, we know through previous experiments with the basic income that, say 60% of student outcomes are related, again, through their home environments. And you can imagine that people who are hungry, like if you're a hungry student and you have your household that you're coming from is extremely stressed out because they're barely getting by every month, your parents are fighting, you just can't focus on your schooling. You're going to do worse in school, and maybe you're not going to even be able to graduate high school. And if you do, it's going to be with poor grades. But if you make sure that environment is a better environment where that stress is removed, where kids go to school with full stomachs, they can focus better on their studies, then those students are going to be more likely to graduate, and they're going to do better. And it also aligns with the experimental data that we have. That is what happens. People do graduate at higher rates and get better grades along the way too. So the money that we put into education systems would go further with this foundation that's there. So if we understand that basic income is this foundation, then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, what should exist on top of it because it's not better provided as money, or what is better provided as money, and it's something that would be an argument to raise the floor higher so that people could obtain those as well through a market system.
Because what I see it is, and I think you also agree with that, because you are talking about how this is a mean to move forward to something different and even maybe go beyond money. It's not, yeah. I never saw, like, at first when I heard about the universal basic income, I said, it's a brilliant idea, it's a great idea. But the more I looked into it, I realized that, okay, this is not enough. But then maybe the way that you should think about it is just that it's like an ambulance, or in today's system, like an immediate help, for whatever we have now. Maybe that's how now I probably see it, because of course we should go beyond that, since all of this money and all of this, like, imagine everybody has a universal basic income. It's going to be great. It will probably save many lives. It's going to make maybe people more relaxed and so forth and all of that. But of course, the nature of our system is going to make rich people even richer, and then the power will still go on top, and climate change will still be a problem, and all of that. So am I correct in saying that maybe you too see it as like an immediate help to go beyond it, a lot more beyond this universal basic income?
Yeah, I see it as that, but much more than that. I see it as like a social innovation or social evolution that would lead to far greater achievements. I think that, like, a way to think about this, like, even like when it comes to like a resource-based economy, let's say too, that is a locked door, and it's really hard to get people to walk through it when it's locked. And I see that there's a lot of other doors that are locked too. And I mean locked is like people can't even really comprehend this, because when you're just trying to survive every day and you can't think about these bigger ideas, you can't think about like the future. It's hard to think about the end of the world when all you can think about is the end of the month. When it comes to like climate change, you don't care about those kinds of things. You're just focused on, you've got your head down, you're focused on just getting to the end of the month. And so that's why I see basic income as like a skeleton key, I think, that could unlock all these doors, where, it's not that it doesn't solve everything, but it enables us to solve so many things that may remain pretty much unsolvable without it. I think that when people think about basic income, it's simple. They first think about it as money, but it's so much more than money. That is the least important aspect of it. The most important aspect is the conditions of the money itself. It's the fact that there are no conditions. It's fully unconditional. And when something is fully unconditional, then that means that's power. That is trust. So when people think of it as a redistribution of money, it's like physically you can see it that way, but really it's a redistribution of power, trust, and time. If you have an unconditional access to food and shelter, then people who would otherwise exploit you can't. If someone wants to pay you minimum wage to do a job, right now you can't refuse that. You have to accept that, because something is better than nothing. You're in no position to say no to that. If your basic needs are guaranteed and unconditional, then you can say, no, I don't need that. I won't do that. I can get by on my own, and I'm going to wait for a better offer. Or if you want to make that better offer, you can pay me more to do this, or you can improve the working conditions so I'll do this. You can improve the hours that I can do this. So it's, if you see it as, say, the power to say no and the freedom to say yes, then basic income is so much more of this powerful idea, because of the fact it's essentially power to the people. Like, people can actually say no to those that they cannot say no to. It makes things consensual, where right now there is no consent because people are coerced into these relationships that they wouldn't otherwise be coerced into. And also, when I say it's a redistribution of trust, like, it's really interesting to think about tying that into money and what that can mean in the future and getting beyond money, because money is essentially like certificates of trust. It's like, it's a way of getting people to engage in transactions with each other. Like, someone grows food, someone needs to eat that food. So how do you get them to exchange? This currency that we use says, okay, if you exchange that for this currency, then somebody else, like, you trust them enough to provide them food, and you trust someone else now in the future to actually provide you what you need in turn for that. And right now, so we have this system based on distrust, where you don't trust people with access to resources until they do what you want them to do. And basic income is instead flipping that and saying, no, we trust people automatically, unconditionally, by this amount. And now people can actually engage in these transactions. And I think that would increase trust in each other too. And it would open up this system of even in more of a gift economy, where you can actually exchange things for free because you no longer need that cost. I've even experienced that myself. I've crowdfunded my own basic income and have been living with them since 2016. And I noticed that, prior to that, it was more important to, say, come up with, earnings for, say, articles. And I would sell articles to publications, and I would essentially, hand away my rights. Like, they would own what I wrote. And now that I have the ability, because I have my basic needs met, I can say, no, I don't need to sell it to anyone, and I don't need to give up those rights that I have to it. And instead, I can actually just put it out there for free. I can put it out there into the commons, to the Creative Commons, and say, look, if you want to republish this, feel free to do that. And I don't need that money. I give it to the world for free. And I think that's something that I have the ability to do, and I do it. And I think that if other people had the ability to do it, they would do it more too. And I think that we could really transition more to this space where you don't need this currency anymore to engage in these transactions.
Yeah, I like that you have this kind of mentality, and you're not just thinking that this universal basic income is going to be like the solution, but you think more in terms of what impacts could it have to move even beyond the need for any currency or trade itself, to not trade for whatever you need. Because, like you say, maybe people will have more time to provide whatever they do as free for others, their music, their books, their maybe work, volunteer work, and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's so important to recognize that so much work that's being done right now is unpaid, and we don't recognize it. It's just ridiculous that someone can be working at home as a parent and not being recognized as a worker. And yet, if they were paid to watch somebody else's kid, then that would be recognized as work, and it would contribute to GDP. And, we need to recognize that so much work being done right now is extremely valuable, that we're all benefiting from, and they're not being compensated for it. They're not receiving access to the resources they need, even when they're doing it. And that's a problem.
Yeah, and if you also think about like all the volunteers we see today, lots of open source projects, a lot of that can also come up. But one thing that I maybe could see as troubling as well in this society is, that corporations will continue to persuade people to buy, all sorts of products, and to be, cooler than your neighbor, and to buy, cool cars and this and that. And that a basic income maybe would allow even more money to be funneled to these big corporations. And with the majority of people, rather than pursuing creative projects, maybe they would just be more, even more caught up in this crazy world of trying to impress each other through Instagram photos and whatever the hell else, and spending on nonsensical items. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that it's almost a symptom of the fact that we don't have a basic income. I would say that it's related, I think, to drug and alcohol use, where there's almost a self-medication aspect to this kind of consumer culture, where you are, buying things in order to feel better about yourself and to feel better in comparison to other people. And of course, we know that there's more of that too in a highly unequal society. So if we want to reduce that, then we need to first make society more equal, which is something that basic income does. So we would directly make it more equal. But also, we know too from experiments that entrepreneurship is a major result of basic income. It's something that there are certain effects that are, like, I would consider to be universal. Like, I see it over and over and over and over again. And self-employment is one of those things. I think that people have a natural desire to pursue, their own interests, and to not necessarily accept wage labor, but to just come up with their own. Everyone has their own ideas. They want to create their own businesses. In Namibia, self-employment jumped 301%. In the India experiment, recipient villages were 3 times as likely to start up their own businesses than controlled villages. And we just see this in any poll. You ask people what they would do with the basic income, a significant percentage of that poll says, I want to start my own business. So I think that we would see people utilizing those resources to start what they want to do, be it a small business or even volunteering, coming up with their own startup, these kinds of things that would compete against those other things. And I also think that with reduced stress and guaranteed survival, less inequality, that people would be less interested in buying these things, like just to buy them. And I think that people would be more interested in creating things that are actually important and useful, and also helping each other, which is another common result of these kind of experiments, is increased social cohesion, increased trust. I think that people would be willing to work together with basic income as well.
What concerns me about, I kind of like what Sasha was saying, the same, like I'm a bit concerned that maybe there will be other effect and people will get more maybe accepting of this society, and just like I think Seb put it very well. I think he got that from somewhere else. I don't know where he come up with that, but it's like basic income, someone says, it's almost like giving money to the monopoly players who are losing just to keep the game going a little bit. So I'm afraid, not to make people more accepting of this society and be more okay with whatever is happening, just because they go by every day and they can survive in this system, to not make a class of just survivors in this society, and the rest the money will trickle down to the richest people. Because I see now, like I've read the recent news, that for the past weeks, because of the coronavirus, Jeff Bezos increased his fortune by around 28 billion or something, because people buy more stuff. So what, such?
Yeah, he's in the right business.
Yeah, because the difference is still really huge. If everyone has a basic income, but some still have billions, then.
So it has to be done something about that.
So, I think that again, you're going to reduce inequality just directly, which I think is going to have its own effects. But also, you're going to for people that they don't have right now. Just imagine your raise in wages in Amazon to get people to work there, if they had the power to refuse to work there. And until they have that power, then Bezos is going to have a lot more money. Amazon is going to make a lot more money. So economically speaking, I think that you introduce basic income, then Bezos is going to have to pay out more to people. And I also think there's going to be a democratic effect too, because one of the things that people also don't have the time to do and is unpaid work is the work of citizenship. You know, back in ancient Rome, that was considered the most important job of all, was being a citizen. And so if people have this greater amount of power and this greater amount of time to be engaged as citizens, then I also think that you're going to see laws in place that actually succeed in taxing people like Bezos and companies like Amazon. Whereas right now, you just can't do that because all the power's in the hands of the rich and the lobbyists, and people aren't able to do anything about that. And I also think that it's important to see UBI as a kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of setup, where right now people are just trying to survive. They're trying to just get those most basic levels. They're trying to climb up to, say, level 2 or 3 or something, and that's all they can ever get to. They can't get to the top levels where they're actually thriving. They're becoming better versions of themselves. They're succeeding in what they want to succeed at. They're building relationships with people that are important to them. They're essentially limited and prevented from that. But if we all start at, say, level 2 with our basic needs met, then everyone is able to actually better achieve those higher needs that we all have. And I think a society of people with who are actually, a greater percentage of them are reaching the top of the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's just a much better society in all kinds of ways. And it's so much more capable of achieving much greater things than it is right now.
I totally agree that, giving, say, like $1,000 to people that are in extreme poverty will help them. But my concern is that the mechanisms of the system are so great that even if you give somebody $1,000, like the rent is $700. If they have kids, then they're left with $300 to eat off of. It's just, and then like maybe they may find new ways to tax people, and you have all these big corporations that have like tax evasion already, where they put their money on some island that has no taxes. I mean, there's just so many problems that even though it's going to help some people in the long run, like how do we basically, I think this is like a stepping stone to get to the next level, but then how do we get from there to, to maintain helping people that are in extreme situations? You know what I mean? I don't.
Yeah. So I guess first of all, let's start the say targeting people. Let's look at that. So we agree that let's say we agree as a society that there are people in need, and they should be the ones that are helped most of all. It's most important to reach them. And so we create this system of conditionality where we say, okay, if you're earning less than this amount, if you're in this kind of situation, then we'll get money to you. And if you don't need it, then you don't. And I think that's the assumption that a lot of people have, that that's the way that these systems work, and they succeed in working in that way. But they actually don't. In the U.S., there are 13 million people in poverty who are receiving no assistance whatsoever, despite obviously qualifying for that assistance. They don't get it. If you look at food stamps itself, it's our best program here in the U.S. And out of every 4 people in poverty, 3 people are getting that assistance. And so 1 out of 4 people aren't. And that assistance, too, is, it can last 3 weeks instead of a full month. And you can only qualify for it for 3 months unless you have dependent kids. And you can also only apply for it every 3 years. And if you look at other programs too, if you're looking at, say, disability, 1 out of 5 people with a disability in the U.S. is receiving income assistance. 4 out of 5 aren't. If you're looking at our system called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which is our cash welfare system, nationwide, about 1 out of 5 families who qualify for it get it, 4 out of 5 don't. And in some states, it's far worse. Like here in Louisiana, where I live, out of every 100 families in poverty, only 4 are getting this assistance. And they looked at, there's a study that was done, I think about it last year, where they looked at, let's say, the effects of targeting when it comes to malnutrition. And they thought, okay, so if we target the bottom 40%, you would think that if we targeted the bottom 40%, we would cover everyone who is suffering from malnutrition, right? I would think it would be a pretty high number. It's actually 50%. So you're only reaching 50% of people who are malnourished if you target the bottom 40%. So I think it's really important that if we believe that there are people in need and we want to make sure that everyone in need gets it, then universality is the only way to achieve that. We have to make sure that by making sure everybody gets something, then we don't exclude anyone, because it's far more important that people in need get what they need than it is that someone who isn't in need gets what they don't need.
Yeah, I think that's something that we agree. Yes, Jen.
I was going to say, I totally agree that, like, say in the beginning, it's going to be super helpful. But then like 10 years from now, if we're still doing this universal basic income and say like they raise the taxes on people and, the people at the top are still doing these schemes where they put money, on some island where they're not getting taxed, even though that's how it's supposed to work. That's how we're supposed to get this money to fund the universal basic income. I just feel like that in the long run, like if we don't figure out a way to get from universal basic income to another step of improving, the greater health of all of society, then we're just going to end up back in the same boat that we are now.
I just want to quickly, just to mention this because it's relevant, I think, for this discussion. I would say that I think to, in a way, defeat Bezos and maybe make him not so rich anymore and treat people better, one argument could be that if you give money to people, those people can refuse, to work low-paid jobs at Amazon or work at all and be like, fuck off, Jeff Bezos, I'm not going to work because I can afford it. On the other hand...
Then you'll hire Mexicans.
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say. On the other hand, you can import people from other countries or automate, and these people could become even more powerful regardless of that. So this maybe not be a tool to fight against the abuse of those in power. What would you say about that and what Jen was saying?
So also, I do want to make clear, because I do think that there may be some confusion here, and I know that it's a common confusion anyways. But when I talk about universal basic income and talk about, going into the future with that, I don't see it as like a floor that stays where it is and never moves. I consider it as, I think the best way to go about it is to actually have it grow with productivity. Right now, we are in the US, we're twice as productive as we were in the 1970s. And are we all earning twice as much? No. Are we all working half as much? No. All that productivity growth has gone to the very top. So if we create a floor and we say, okay, as we get more productive, as we automate more, as we learn more, as we gain more knowledge that makes us more productive, then let's raise that floor with productivity. So over time, let's say it starts right now at $1,000 per month, but maybe, in another decade or something, it's $2,000 in another, and this is in our dollars, if you have it right now, if it's, 20% of GDP and it's a certain amount, and then GDP doubles over time, then, you're going to have a lot larger amount. And if you're talking decades from now, you could be looking at a basic income in like today's dollars. That's like, say, $60,000 a year, $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year. And I think when it gets that high, when you have that much access to resources, then I think money itself becomes, less and less important, because again, people are able to do so much more of what they want to do, themselves. And also, as you're creating that, and then this floor is lifting, the higher it gets, the more power everybody has. I mean, when like people, if you're familiar with the term, fuck you money, then this is like money that's like such amount of money that you can actually just say no to anybody. You have complete autonomy and power over yourself, and you don't answer to anyone. As this amount gets higher, then that power means that you have more power against these people that have all the power right now. You are creating a society that is more and more equal over time, and people can, let's say they're hiding their money in these places overseas, and it's just like sitting there and hiding away. Does it really matter? Because it's just, if you look at money itself and you're even wondering, what it is, you can even think of it as like, these just like piles of tickets that's not accessing anything, it's not doing anything. But if you make sure that what matters is people being able to utilize those tickets. And so if there's plenty of money, these tickets in the hands of people who use them, then that's what matters. And if like somebody is sitting on like a pile of unused tickets, that doesn't matter. It doesn't even really mean anything. What matters is making sure that the economy works for all of us. And that's what this would do. And I think that, again, over time, you could transition away to entirely rethinking what it is that all of this is for in the first place. And when it comes to calculation ability, then you don't even necessarily need this distributed computer of resource allocation that is money.
How are people? How can people gain power over these rich creatures that, since they are their clients, regardless how much you give them the money, how much money you give them, in the end they are going to buy the products of these rich companies, and they're becoming their clients all the time. So I was just curious, how would you see that? How are they gaining power regardless of how much money you give them in this basic income condition?
Yeah, so I'm less worried about them, I think, than others may be, because I do think that we're talking about increased competition and more ability for people to create new things that aren't those, and that would reduce their power because they would be competing against those things. And also, I think that just the power of citizenship is such an unutilized power right now, as long as people aren't able to engage in that way. And I think that if you have a system, if you have a citizenry of people who all can be more engaged, can be more knowledgeable, have the time to study and learn about what's going on, about these people at the top, that they effectively gain their own lobbying power, whereas only the rich have lobbyists right now. They have the ability to volunteer to make sure that actual grassroots representatives are the ones who represent them, that they have the money to make sure that those representatives have the ability to win the elections, whereas right now only the rich and those supporters of the rich get that money to win elections. This actually creates more democracy. I think that UBI strengthens democracy, and democracy strengthens UBI, and that with a stronger democracy, then that is what is able to finally confront these, gigantic powers that exist right now in this state of high inequality. I think that that's one of the big problems right now, is that these corporations, these ultra rich, these billionaires, they have as much power as they do because we don't. And if we just make sure that we have that power, then those are problems that become solvable.
May I ask a question? What if money just lose their value? Let's say UBI is applied even globally, and then everyone on Earth got $1,000 a month. But then, let's say landlords, they just raise the prices. Let's say the same 1,000, or it's just one example. And then utility bills goes up, and everything goes up, and then at the end we came back to the same situation where we started.
Yeah, that's probably the most common response to the idea, as is if people everyone's going to become lazy and not do anything anymore with the basic income. It's like the work incentive worry and the inflation worry are the two biggest ones. So just to get into the inflation one a bit. First of all, I have an article about it that I recommend everyone read. If you just look up, say, basic income inflation and Scott Santon's, you'll find it easily. But there's a lot of variables in this equation. It's not just like a single variable equation. So first of all, we, for the most part, again, are talking about a tax and transfer version of basic income, where you're essentially circulating existing money from the hands of those who aren't spending it into the hands of those who do spend it. It's not inflating the money supply. So there's not more dollars chasing the same amount of stuff. It's the same amount of dollars chasing the same amount of stuff, just with different people having it to spend. And if you look at it that way, then there's certainly a lot less possibility of inflation. And then the next thing too is you still have competition. Competition doesn't go away, and it's effectively enhanced by basic income, because again, you have all these entrepreneurs who are popping up, starting up their own businesses to compete. And so if you imagine being a business, and they let's say cost of milk is $4 a gallon right now, and so you say, well, everyone has more money, I'm going to charge $8 a gallon. Well, all it takes is some other business to not do that, especially your direct competitor, and you're going to be hurting. In fact, in Alaska, every time the dividend goes out, and I should also say too that this is the closest thing in the world to an operating UBI has existed in Alaska since 1982, where every year, every person there, child and adult, rich and poor alike, gets a dividend of around $1,000 to $2,000 on average. So what happens when that dividend goes out? Well, there's actually a lot of dividend sales that happen as companies compete for those dollars. And so you can see that there's the exact opposite that happens. It's like a deflationary impact where prices go down instead of prices going up, because there is this competition. It would be a really bad idea to raise your prices in a world where there's a lot even more competition and others won't actually raise those prices. And rent is a separate thing too, but you can look at that as well, where first of all, we know from experiments that more people become homeowners with basic income than they would otherwise. A lot of people are renters because they can't afford to be homeowners. And so if you've got more homeowners, then you've got fewer people looking to rent, and that reduces prices and makes it more difficult for landlords to raise the rent, because there's just fewer people looking for landlords. And also at a national scale, you open things up geographically, whereas right now they're kind of geo-locked. So right now, kind of people are coupled to cities in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be, because cities are where the jobs are. And so if you disconnect income from work in a way that enables people to live in places where they wouldn't otherwise be able to live, then that effectively introduces competition between landlord cost of living areas and low cost of living areas in a way that doesn't exist right now. You can imagine that there would be a reduction in high density areas and an increase in rural areas, much more so than you see right now. And therefore, that would again push rent pressure down in those instances. And I would also point at Alaska too. It's interesting to see, prior to the dividend beginning in Alaska, the consumer price index, which is a measure of inflation, was higher in Alaska than it was in the rest of the US. And post 1982, after the dividend began, the CPI has always been lower in Alaska than the rest of the country. So if we had expected this inflationary response, we would have seen the opposite, and we didn't see that. And also there's a really interesting experiment. It's an ongoing experiment in Kenya. It's a 12-year basic income experiment. and they also did a large. It was basically the first kind of macroeconomic experiment look at the effect of unconditional cash transfers on inflation. And they found that a distribution that was equivalent to 15% of GDP led to an inflationary increase of 0.1%. So it's extremely small, if any, practically zero. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more variables involved in this equation. And I could talk about inflation a lot more, but I will just say that if you look into this and you look at all the variables, it really doesn't make any sense at all to be worried in a way that people are when it comes to inflation and universal basic income.
I think it's the argument of competition. Of course, I understand it, but it's also a lot more on paper than probably in reality. Or in reality, there are a lot of influences out there at play, and I don't know how can you stop people from raising the rents, or like I know for sure that here in this town that we live, people raising rents out of nothing, even though it's an abundance of apartments, and they don't quite care about whatever competition. In this other sense, I've seen big companies from Airbnb to Uber to Amazon completely killing any competition, that they don't let anything go past their smelling area, like they can't even go close to Amazon and so forth. So I don't know how we can put up with these immense pressures of the society only by relying mainly on the idea of a universal basic income, unless you do something more than that, because you don't deal with the forces that, for one, make companies want to sell more and more stuff, and second, people all around the world becoming consumers and wanting more and more stuff because they are influenced. Like, I know many people who earn enough money to have a great life, but they still go for that iPhone, they still go for that traveling agencies ads, and these immense pressures. What do you think about these immense pressures? Because that's what I really see in this society, making people's values consumeristic values, and so for one, I don't know how competition, I'm not convinced that competition can stabilize prices to not go a bit nuts in terms of resources, including rent. And second, how can you put up with this immense pressure from this society of consumerism to not make people want a lot more than this UBI? So I think these are immense pressures that.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize again that when I talk about UBI, it's not, I'm not saying that's the only thing that we should do. It is the foundation. So yeah, we should still have other policies in place to look at things, especially when it comes to housing. There are issues in place that make housing kind of a separate problem on its own. And there, of course, is the argument between, say, NIMBY and YIMBY, where we can look at, say, rent control as a possibility, or we can say, well, the answer is not rent control. It's actually making sure that we increase the supply of housing, and let's make sure that we look at the regulations that are preventing the housing. Let's make sure that we create enough housing that the price is affordable. Let's make policies in place that make housing affordable. We should still pursue those in addition to basic income. I just think it's important to recognize that we want to make sure that people can better afford housing, can better afford to become homeowners, and on top of that, look at these other issues. And also, when it comes to say price fixing situations, that does happen. Like, there are instances where competition is not able to actually function because there are situations where the monopolies that exist, either artificial or created, or there are people agreeing together to price fix. And those are separate issues that we need to look at as well. That we don't want monopolies. We want to encourage actual competition, and those are other policies that need to be in place as well.
Isn't competition encouraging this state of monopoly in the end?
Is what?
isn't competition encouraging this state of monopoly in the end? Because probably Amazon started as a competitor to something else, and Google and others, and they, because of the nature of this system, they will become on top, they'll come on top, and then they will try price fixing all of that and treat people badly, their employees and so forth.
Yeah, we want to continue, like, competition is able to innovate new ideas, and like today's MySpace can be tomorrow's Facebook, today's Facebook can be tomorrow's whatever we haven't seen yet, but we want to continue that innovation loop, even if there's always something that crawls to the top. And there's also a difference in these companies and organizations too, where the network effect operates in different ways. So like Facebook and Google and these companies are as big as they are because of the network effect. You can't really have like 10 different smaller Googles competing against each other, and 10 different smaller Facebooks competing against each other, because the value, the immense value of Facebook is the fact that it has billions of people in its network. So we do have to recognize too that there are certain things where it just works better for one organization to have that, but at the same time we still want to encourage new networks to form. And I think the best way to go about like a successful large network like that too is one that actually pays all of its users. That all users should actually be seen as the ones creating the value, because again, that is where the network effect says that's where the value comes from. Facebook is such a massively rich corporation, and Zuckerberg is so rich because of the fact that people are not getting paid as users. They're not getting their share of the network value that they're creating. And I would hope that as part of this recognition that we should be receiving a basic income, that part of it too is the why. Like, why should be receiving this? Not only is it about like ending poverty and increasing security and these kinds of things, but it's also the fact that we are all generating this value in some way. We are creating data at a constant stream, and we're not even having to work to do it. Like, there is active things that we're doing. Let's say when we tweet something or create a Facebook post, like that's a work that's like a micro task or something that we're doing that we're not getting paid for. But also our very existence is creating data that's valuable, that is being unrecognized, and our actions are creating value.
Shaz, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So, hi Scott. Just to jump in there. So when you say we're creating value by using these services, and the argument from the people who produce these services is that okay, your payment for creating value using our service is that you get to use that service for free, and that should be enough payment for you.
Yeah, it's funny how that is the common argument, and at the same time, if you buy stock in Apple, no one tells the stockholder that their value is the fact that they can buy an iPhone. Instead they receive a return on investment in the form of a dividend, because it's understood that they put up the investment. And so that's what we're all doing too. Like, our data is training these algorithms. It's making technology possible that wouldn't otherwise be possible. And it also funded a lot of this technology too at a basic research level. Our tax dollars is funding all level 1 research, because it's not profitable for companies to do it. So if we're the one putting up all the money, then we should be receiving a return on it. And it's not a sufficient return to say that we should just enjoy being able to buy the product.
Okay, but where does it say that it is my data? Where I can prove to you that a certain amount of capital that I have is my capital because I earned it in some way. But where does it say that it is my data in the same way that it would be capital for investment?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. That's the problem, and I think that we need to recognize that. Like, we need to, as a civilization, realize that our data is our data. That it should be, just as we see property rights operating for other things, that we should see data as our property right, and that's an evolution that we have to make ourselves. It's because it's not going to just happen on its own. We actually have to say, our data is ours, and what does that mean? What is that? How does that impact the internet? How does it impact all the various companies out there? So I think that that the idea of data as a property right is a big evolution too.
Yeah, I agree with.
I would say that if you look at YouTube, it kind of pays users, like shares the ad revenue. I think it's 49% to 51%, or even something along those lines. But YouTube, bits, of course, is the biggest probably media. Google itself, Alphabet, because that's the parent company, is the biggest media company in the world. That also, I just wanted to point this out, and that also kind of pushes people to create more like clickbait content, or content for the sake of creating content. We do talk in detail in TROM books about that. Steemit is another platform where they try to pay people for posting there, and in time people started to post just for the sake of making more money, or comments just for the sake of making more money. So I feel like this incentive, if we don't try to address this incentive of doing something for getting a profit in return, to trade, to make money, the profit, then we are not going far away, even with the universal basic income or with any kind of other idea. So I think that's extremely crucial to put into that plan there.
Yeah. In fact, I think Steemit is a great example. And I even, when Steemit first started, I encouraged the user base to say, okay, let's make it so that you for those who don't know, Steemit is kind of like a Reddit kind of situation where people post links and then you say upvote them, and if there's a lot of upvotes on a post, then the poster, they will get a percentage of revenue in the form of cryptocurrency called Steem dollars, through this, and also the upvoters themselves can receive a percentage of this as well. So it's like a way of directly incentivizing and directly sharing the value created with everybody. And so when that platform started, I thought that an improvement of it would be that yes, there's a percentage that goes to the poster. Yes, there's a percentage that goes to the upvoter and the commenters who themselves get upvoted. But also a percentage of that should go to everybody on the platform in the form of these Steem dollars. And so that would be a basic income built into that platform, so that you still are earning even additional stuff on top of that foundation, but that foundation still exists in the platform. So I hope that we're going to start seeing that at some point, where platforms actually do start paying their users, and above and beyond paying their users, I would like it if there was this universal kind of dividend operating beneath that too. So let's say everybody who has a Facebook account would earn, $1 a month or something. I don't know what it would be, but it would be something that would be fully universal and is everybody's share. And I think that if you build that into various networks, then not only are you encouraging this understanding that the network value was created by the people themselves, but also in a world with basic income, then you're building more and more incomes on top of the basic income, and therefore, raising that floor as well for everybody.
Isn't this a bad incentive to pay, for example, like you said, Facebook? If Facebook will pay $1 for whoever is a user there, isn't that a bad incentive for Facebook and for people? Because Facebook is so powerful, they can do that. I cannot do that on my platform. Like, Facebook is doing similar things. They try to do it in India, providing free internet. So in a way, paying people, like providing free internet, but only by using the Facebook app. That makes them more of a monopoly. In Romania, for example, where I'm originally from, there are internet subscriptions that come free with like unlimited traffic on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Facebook. So in a way, they are already doing, like, if you are part of us, you have free unlimited internet access. So that pushes competition down because no one can compete with that kind of thing, and incentivizes them to engage into such schemes even more. I would say.
It's interesting to think about that, because we're certainly not seeing that right now. Like, you could say that Facebook is in a position where it is the easiest to do that, but they're also not doing it. And I think that if we're going, whatever is going to surpass Facebook and become the next large kind of network, I would prefer that it be a network that actually compensates its users and recognizes its users as having, that right to the data that they're creating. And then if you're looking at, okay, what could surpass that? Well, maybe it's a company that provides more of a share with that. And if you're looking at so what is the kind of maximum share that you can provide to all of your users and still function? Well, then you're looking at a company that it's not creating these billionaires out of it because they're sharing so much of the revenue with their people. You're looking at more of like a worker self-owned kind of co-op situation where all the users are effectively the owners, and instead of, you're not seeing these ginormous billionaires as a result. So this would further decrease inequality, and I think that's what we should want.
I think it's definitely a huge challenge to make people play well in this game of Monopoly by putting rules, because it's the incentives are so huge. I mean, I hope the universal basic income is tried, and that's why I invited you here. That's why I want to talk about this. But I think we need so much more than that, because rules and laws. I made a book over 1,000 pages long a year ago, showcasing in detail how from all around the world laws are always making little dent. People, companies avoid taxes every time. People are charlatans basically at any little level. They are pushed to become like that. Like here in Spain, I was surprised why they make a contract for 11 months for my apartment. Guess what? Because it doesn't register as a long rental. It registers as vacation, like a holidays rental. Even here they evade that in so many different ways. So I think to force people to play nice in this society is to remove the incentive that makes them play badly. And I think universal basic income can alleviate that at certain levels. But I think at big levels, it's a different story, I would say. It's very different. So I don't have the answer, but I think we should admit that it's very difficult at bigger levels to deal with those monsters and that incentive.
Just
okay.
Sorry, just one thing. There was this one point you brought up, which I really agree with. You said that with a universal basic income, it would incentivize people to not rely on cities, especially with migrant labor, to move from rural areas to cities. I really do think that is an effect that you will see happen. If people have enough money not to come to cities, they probably will not want to do it anyway. But where I do think, I have one question for you though, is do you think a universal basic income on its own is somewhat deficient without a universal maximum income?
Can you say that again?
Do you think a universal basic income as a tool for redistributing wealth would be more effective if it was paired with something like a universal maximum income?
I mean, again, so when by universal maximum income, are you talking about like a very high basic income, or are you talking about like a high minimum wage that's like that's more of like a maximum wage or something, where it's like tied to CEO earnings or something like that?
Yeah.
So what
Is there a cap on the amount of money you can make?
Yeah.
What's that?
Like a cap on the amount of money you can make?
And the rest of it.
Oh, I see. So basically you're almost saying like there's 100% tax on income past a certain point?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I would prefer that even if we were going to go down a road like that, where we say that there's a limit, I would prefer like some kind of ratio limit. So like, let's say the CEO of a company can only earn, a maximum of like 100 times whatever the median income is or something like that. Because you want to create the incentives too, where there's still that growth potential, where, you know, as long as we want some inequality so that people can have that incentive to go higher, but we don't want to completely remove that incentive by ever creating like 100% kind of limit, I believe. I would rather that we have this floor, and it's almost kind of like a visualization of this, like instead of kind of, let's say like the rich are like this rocket ship that are taking off, and instead of like tying a lasso to it and try to like prevent the rocket from like getting too high away from everybody else, that instead we like basically lasso it to the floor so that the rocket carries everyone with it, so that we all go up at the same time. Like that's what I would prefer, that kind of incentive where we're just making sure that we continually ratchet up the floor as we basically create more national, you know, productivity together.
Which I would imagine, which I would imagine is something like anything beyond that 100, you know, anything which falls into that 100% taxation bracket gets fed back into the universal basic income, and that universal basic goes up.
Yeah, and I see what you mean, but also I guess I would want to like not go too high, because there are studies about like what is the maximum amount of taxation that we can do that that doesn't reduce overall productivity and innovation. And I've seen that to be like in the 70% range. So like anything like 80% and above, you're actually going to see less national productivity because of that. But what we could do is say, okay, so, you know, we could have you could either have like a graduated kind of thing where, you know, you're earning over $1 million. So then it's like, you know, 50% or 60% or something, and then you're earning like $1 billion, and then that's when you're like at 80% or whatever. Like you could do something like that. And also there's other ways of getting that taxation as well. You know, like if you're looking at like taxing stock or taxing like land value with a land value tax. You know, there's a lot of other ways that we could get at that, you know, revenue that's going to the very top, in ways that raise the effective tax rate to what would be like the maximum effective tax rate. It's that kind of thing that I want to use what works and avoid what just sounds good, like because, you know, maybe something that we ideologically agree with or just sounds like it would work. So I don't want to do 100% effective. I don't want to do 100% tax rates, but we should actually, you know, we do want to raise it higher. We just shouldn't raise it too high, and we should make sure that it raises the floor along the way.
What concerns me is that I've seen this kind of rules. You can see there are lots of rules depending from the country of how you should tax people and create a more fair economy and so forth. And what I've seen all the time is that big corporations, not only big corporations, but they avoid it quite easily. Like I think Apple and Amazon and so forth pay less taxes percentages than any Americans in the US, because they can very easily avoid that. You know, even in Romania, when the communism was there, no one could own more than 2 houses. Somehow they found loopholes, you know, even in that kind of environment. So I feel like this incentive will push people to find loopholes regardless of these kinds of taxes. I don't see how.
Yeah. So I think part of this too is again, we have a weakened democracy all over the world. Like the powerful they're not finding these loopholes. They're paying for them. You know, they're able to create these loopholes and perpetuate them. And if we have a more empowered population with a more activated citizenry who are more involved, who are running themselves to be representatives, who are able to help actual grassroots representatives win these elections, then we're going to have the tools available to get rid of those loopholes, to no longer allow that kind of lobbying, to go after this money that is right now, there's nothing stopping the U.S. government from going after these tax havens. We have the physical ability to do that. We just don't do it. And also there are ways of taxing too that are much less avoidable than the traditional routes that utilize income taxes. Like, as an example, I think land value taxation is something that I would like to see more people talking about and see more people implementing, because of the fact it's inescapable. Property is real; it's sitting right there, and whoever owns it needs to pay a percentage of the land value. And you can't hide that. You can't hide a piece of property in a bank somewhere in an island in the Bahamas. If you own that property, you have to pay it. And just so for people who aren't familiar with the idea of a land value tax, this goes back to like Henry George. This is the idea that you tax the unimproved value of land. So you're not taxing what's built on top of the land. You're taxing the actual land value. So if, let's say, there's a skyscraper in a city next to a empty parking lot, and it's both the exact same amount of land, then let's say the value of that land is $100,000, $100,000, or say $1 million is the value of that land. So if you had a 10% land value tax, then every year the owner of that property would need to pay $100,000. So if you're a skyscraper, you've developed the land to the point where you can afford that tax. And if you're the parking lot, then you can't afford that tax because you're not doing anything with it. You haven't developed the land. And so now you have to either build up the parking lot into like a multi-level structure, or you have to sell it to someone who will actually turn it into something that can pay that land value tax. So it encourages development, especially in cities. And also that's great for housing, because it encourages people to actually build up like apartment buildings and these kinds of things that actually increase the amount of housing, which reduces the cost of rent. So not only is it something that is inescapable by the rich, they would have to pay it. It is something that has a lot of other good incentives built into it, because the amount of land, of course, is limited unless you like build an island somewhere.
Or fake
and
it.
Because it's limited, then you're encouraging.
Or you fake it. You may say that you have a piece of land. I've seen these kinds of schemes where people are completely lying about owning all kinds of pieces of lands because they forge documents and so forth. What I'm saying is that people are extremely creative. And in this Origin of Most Problems book that I wrote, I give a lot of examples of people because you are incentivized, to break the law for your own profit. You will break it.
I see what you mean, but in this example, it doesn't make any sense to invent a piece of land in order to be taxed on it. Why would you increase your taxes?
I think he's saying that was like evading it, saying that you don't own it, so that you can escape paying the tax, like that.
Yeah, but you do own it. It's there. It's right there.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. That's the thing. It happens a lot of the time in India, where you will actually own the land. You actually will, but then you can show documents for somebody else who owns the land, and that person will be dead, and nobody pays property tax. And the downside of that is, because if you're going to force people to pay tax, it's going to incentivize people to develop land in ways that are revenue generating and not really efficient from a resource perspective. And most of housing is anyway about speculation, especially in markets that are very, very cash heavy. And I don't agree with you on that, whether people should be taxing the land for universal basic income at all. There are other things we can tax, and basically there's that. It's a very, very good idea for immediate relief, but for in the long term, I just see people going to misuse it anyway. People are very creative.
I think that there's
when the levels of inequality are so vast right now, it's like, you know, if somebody has a glass of water that's almost already full and then an empty glass next to it, and you dump the same amount into both glasses, like the one that's empty is barely, you know, getting to that level of the other person's glass. You know, I just don't see how in the long run. I mean, at first, you know, it'll provide somebody with one drink of water, but they need to have many drinks of water. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's not just a drink of water. That's looking at it from, like, again, the monetary perspective and seeing it just as money. It is not just money. It is that having a glass of water, you know, when it comes to being able to survive unconditionally, means that you have power, and it's the level of power that you do not have right now. And if we increase that power over time, because we're able to do so much more as our productivity grows, then people gain more power. And that is what we're lacking right now, is that power. And so it's really important that we see it as not just money. It is about so much more than that. It's about what you can do with the money, what you are prevented from doing right now because you don't have that money unconditionally. We by making sure that people have unconditional access to resources, that means that so many more things are possible that are just not possible right now. And again, that includes making government for us, making laws that actually work, making representatives actually enforce those laws, you know, coming up with things that actually help people actually make the world a better place, instead of just trying to, you know, create governments in ways that only benefit the disproportionate small few who are paying for the elections and the lobbyists for people to make government only benefit them.
There was this great example I came across in the book that I wrote, The Money Game and Beyond. This guy from Tanzania, I think. He was a guy who was very well educated, and he was a teacher, and he wanted to make everything quite equal in Tanzania and give houses to people, give access to. It was a complete mess back then. And he was a pretty popular guy, and then he became basically, to put this, to summarize, the next Hitler, basically, because the forces of trades between his state and other states, you know, made him want more and transformed from this really good guy into a really like awful human being who will profit from people. This story to me is like, I don't see how this forces of trades between us is like a monopoly game will be able to be stopped with rules and laws. And I don't see UBI as a rule and a law. I see it more as a mean for people to have access now, immediate access to their basic needs. So that's the important part that I see about the universal basic income. I do not agree that laws and rules will make any much of a dent in this society. That's why I agree that universal basic income right now could be a great escape, especially because of the pandemic. And we didn't touch upon that, but I think that's extremely important, because now with this pandemic, right, have you seen a huge rise in the interest of a basic income base from your perspective there?
Oh, absolutely. There's first of all, like when a crisis happens, we look for the tools available. And fortunately, we have seen a growth of basic income in the years prior to this, where this tool is available to the point where people are actually reaching for it. They're saying, okay, we are telling our people to stay home. We need to make sure that these people can still eat. They can still pay for their housing and their bills. Let's make sure that they get the money. And of course, countries are going about this in mostly conditional ways. You know, there are some exceptions where, like, say, you know, Hong Kong is one of the better examples, where they just immediately kind of distributed a dividend to everybody, or, you know, amount to everybody. But for the most part, we're going through, like, we're utilizing existing safety nets. We're utilizing unemployment insurance systems. We are in some cases using like the Kurzarbeit strategy, where the government is giving money to companies in order to basically subsidize wages so that people can keep getting paid by their companies, even if they're not actually doing work at those companies anymore, in order to keep them employed. And then they're going about trying to reach people in ways that the safety net doesn't already reach. So let's say all over the world, you have freelancers, gig laborers, the self-employed who are largely excluded from safety nets. And so governments are saying, okay, well, let's make sure that we reach these people because we're not doing that right now. And in some places, they're thinking, okay, well, let's do somewhat an unconditional amount, but only means test it. So like in the U.S. with this one-time $1,200 payment, that is, it's trying to reach everybody under a certain line, no matter what work you're doing and whether you're employed or not. And that's like a good start. But of course, you're still excluding some people, because even if you think that someone who's earning more than $100,000 and you think, oh, they earned that in 2019 or 2018, so they don't need that, they don't need any assistance. Well, they could just be as worse off as everybody else, and so excluding them hurts them. And I think that it's a real opportunity where you're not only seeing the value of making sure that people receive an amount of income to get through this, but you're seeing the value of universalizing the income and removing the conditions, because these systems are just not equipped. Like in the US, with this $600 per week on top of unemployment insurance system that we're doing, we're leveraging our unemployment system. And as a result, the first week, 3.3 million people went through the system, entered the system. The next one, 6.9 million people did. The next week, 6.6 million did. So here we are, and we're at almost 20 million people that have gone through the system already, and there's still millions of people that haven't. And people have been like on phone lines, and this is true all over the world. People are in giant queues. People are lining up for the benefit systems.
And that's why I'm saying universal basic income is best, right? That's what I'm saying. It's best in this kind of situation because it's a more direct help rather than going to all this bureaucracy that you can't even go now because of the virus. You can just go out and then fill these forms and then talk to authorities. So that's why they are forced now to come up with something more radical, and maybe give people money directly and in a more in a quick way. And if you guys want, okay.
And speed is an important element of this too, where before people cared less about speed. Outside of a crisis situation, they can care about like the conditions and hoping that people jump through these hoops and stuff to get this. But right now, there's an expediency to it. They're saying, okay, people need money immediately. What is the fastest way to do that? Is it to go through their employers? Is it to go through these welfare systems? Or is it just to get people money directly? And the direct approach is the fastest approach, especially when it comes to the banks, like we're seeing in the US, where people who already had provided their direct deposit info in their previous tax returns, they didn't have to do anything. And that money is just showing up in people's accounts right now. No forms were filled out, nothing was needed to be done, and that money is just appearing in their accounts. That is the fastest way of going about it. And that's exactly what we need in this crisis is speed.
Yeah. And guys, if anyone wants to have any input about basic income, and then we can maybe wrap everything.
How would you account for like the homeless and things like this? Like, how do we keep track of who's getting the income and stuff for these kind of people who are on hard times, kind of thing, in sticky situations?
Yeah, I think this is so. There's a few different kind of plans being proposed, different strategies, and I think like part of the problem is that we don't already have a basic income in place. Like if we already had a basic income in place, it would be so easy to just throw out another payment to increase the amount. That would be the absolute best way to go about this. And but we don't have that. So then the next best thing is to build something close to that, and then also to build what we do need in the future, so that those let's say the pipes are in place. In the U.S., and this is true everywhere, but there's a major problem with people being unbanked. Like if you are, it certainly costs a lot of money to be banked, and so many people, when they get a paycheck, they don't even go to the bank to cash it because they don't have a bank account. Let's say they go to Walmart or they go to like a payday loan place or cashing place, and then of course they lose a percentage of their paycheck to that stuff because they're unbanked. And so I think that the best way to go about this actually in the US is to set up everyone with personal accounts at the Federal Reserve Bank so that everyone has their own private accounts. Those are free. It's like no frill stuff. It's a very basic account where money would go through the government in order for like a tax-funded basic income. And also, you would have access to the account. So everyone would have a debit card that would be tied to that account. And also, everyone could go to a U.S. Postal Service to engage with those accounts in person. So we would leverage postal banking to be a part of this as well, so that every single person has a free bank account. And as a result of this too, as I think an important lever going forward is that because it's at the Federal Reserve, then the Federal Reserve could decide to do immediate quantitative easing through the people instead of through giving money to banks in hopes that they lend it out. So as soon as this crisis hit, if we already had that in place, they could have immediately put money into these Federal Reserve accounts with no action from Congress whatsoever. No debate in Congress, no bills at all. It's just the Federal Reserve saying the economy is on fire. We're going to add some water to try to put it out. And that is the absolute fastest way of going about it, is for enabling central banks with the ability to actually do this directly to everybody. And also, it's if you have these free accounts too, like let's say you are homeless on the streets, you don't have any employment, you personally you don't have a bank account at all, and then you have that account. Well, I think it would be you're going to enable organizations to actually form to make sure that you connect people to those accounts. It's so much harder right now because of these conditions and because the fact that income isn't seen as a human right, that you don't. It's so much harder to get money to people. Whereas if it is their right and it's seen as a right, then you can have nonprofits and organizations who are formed and saying, all right, let's make sure that no one is left out. And it's so much easier to do that when it is seen as a right. And I think that is it's such an important element of this discussion too. And this goes back even to Thomas Paine and the way that he saw it, is that, we are the only species on planet Earth that has to pay to live here. It was not a natural thing. It hasn't always been that way. We made it that way. And so as long as there is a price of existence, then that price should be extended unconditionally. The money to pay for that should be provided to everyone unconditionally as a recognition of their human right to existence. And understanding that switches this to just like some kind of monetary thing, but saying that this is about making sure that everyone has the fundamental human right to what they need to live. And of course, that's within a monetary system. So yeah, like if you want to get rid of the monetaries, if you want to get rid of the private property system and you want to say that, okay, there is no price to live, well, then that changes it. And now it's about making sure that everyone has access to the resources they need in whatever, the system is. But I think it's so important that we reach that point where we understand that there is a fundamental human right to those resources. And in this system, it's through income.
And maybe it should be called better like a universal basic help. Doesn't matter if you pay it with money, or doesn't matter if you provide access to resources. You will say that probably it's, and I agree in some aspects that it could be easier right now to just give money to people and access what they need. But in the end, it's not about giving people money. It's about people having access to their basic needs for now, and it's a lot of work to see how that can be done through the system, because it's a very convoluted system. So we'll see about that. I would be happy to see it experimented. I would say nothing will change regardless of that for what I'm doing, for example, at TROM and so forth. I think we need to continue to do what we're doing and inform people what are the problems in this society and what are the solutions, and educate people, because education is extremely important. Else, maybe you cannot go far enough with such solutions. So I would love for it being implemented. And Seb or Sophie or others, if you wanted to say anything or ask any questions.
Yeah, I think I would like to agree with you and add on to it that would maybe be a good immediate solution for this crisis right now, to kind of try and compensate for the shortcomings of the system. But in the long run, the values would be the same. Like, you're talking about productivity and development and competition and making people powerful, but at the end of the day, powerful to do what, and productivity for what? Like, we will still be burning this earth and trying to go to Mars to buy more stuff there, and maybe be productive to make 12 different colors of shoes instead of 10. So the values will be the same,
There's so one thing in the system that it requires right now too is this. There's a lot of what's called negative or inferior goods. And an inferior good is something that there only exists a demand for because people can't afford the superior good. An example of this is, let's say, a cheap pair of shoes versus an inexpensive pair of shoes. So the expensive pair of shoes, it lasts a lot longer. It's very durable, and so it uses that small amount of resources that you could use for like 10 years or whatever, versus like cheap shoes where it uses resources and it uses a lot of them because they wear out like within months or something. So you have to buy like another pair of shoes, another pair of shoes, another pair of shoes, and another pair of shoes. And so I think that part of this, making sure that people can afford the more durable thing, means that demand is going to go down for a lot of these things that are just cheap and just massively using resources that we don't need to use. And the other aspect of this too, I think it would be smart to go about basic income in a way that leverages something called Pigovian taxation. Pigovian taxation is taxation on negative externalities. So like, let's say a carbon tax is a good example of a Pigovian tax, because the cost of using fossil fuels is artificially cheap because the costs is on all of us instead of actually the producer and the user. So if you leverage, like, say, a carbon tax, then you're making it more expensive to use fossil fuels. And as you make something like that more expensive, the demand for it decreases, and the demand for sustainable energy and sustainable economy actually increases. And so you're making, when you do that kind of setup, then you're more likely to, let's say, buy an electric car because you're using electricity instead of gasoline. You're more likely to buy solar panels. You're more actually able to afford these things too because you have the more income. So I think that we should leverage the tax system to actually basically have better environmental outcomes than we would otherwise, if you are getting that.
Yeah, or maybe the more powerful globally will just be, like they're doing, buying other companies' quotas or other states' quotas. And I know in Denmark, for example, where I live, we have all the resources, and globally speaking, people talk about good democracy, to be able to drive electric cars, all of us, you know what I mean? But lobbyism has been putting crazy taxes on electric cars because these huge companies are in so much power. So these forces will still be at play even with the UBI, long term.
Yeah, if I could maybe just give my thoughts. Yeah, I think it's really an awesome idea, basic income, and I hope it will continue to be implemented more and more in different parts of the world. I also think it depends where it's implemented, and like you said, Alaska and other small. Alaska is probably one of the bigger examples, but it would be awesome to see it on a national level somewhere. I think in Finland or something, they're trying that out, and nowadays with the whole Corona pandemic and with future pandemics like this, you really see the need of such a program to eliminate all the bureaucracy that's in most welfare programs. But I also think it's kind of funny that it's mainly the state that is liable or is seen as liable or seen as the person who is responsible to pay people this basic income, because in many regards, corporations have a lot more money than states, and hence people like Mark Zuckerberg or whoever else are in high favor of the government paying a basic income, so they are maybe not responsible themselves.
I think the idea is to take taxes from them, no?
Yeah, maybe that would be one way, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, my thoughts is just that it is tricky, I think, for people to care about their surroundings when there's so many people and they don't necessarily maybe see the local impacts that it might have. But yeah, I hope that it somehow gets implemented more and one can see what happens. I think there was this presidential candidate, Andrew Yang in America, who was a big proponent of it. But yeah, it would be interesting to see it played out. And also in Germany, I know that there are many people leaning towards these ideas. But again, it would differ across the board. Like what does it mean in a place like India or China, or on a global level, like the different amounts, and some people are also working abroad and who will pay that and stuff like that. So I don't know, it's all a little bit tricky, of course, and case by case.
And it's interesting too to see which country will be the first. So India is talking about it. They're looking into this, and like Canada just did their emergency relief benefit, and they're still talking about basic income because they're realizing that relief benefit still has holes, that's still leaving people out. So Canada is also a possibility, and then you have like Spain as a possibility, Singapore as a possibility. Brazil actually passed basic income into law in 2004. They're the only country in the world who actually have passed it in the law, but they left it up to the president, and the president has never extended it. So they started off with Bolsa Familia was their program that was essentially basic income for the poor, and it was up to them to expand it over time, and they never have. And now they're actually looking, well, maybe this is the time to expand it to everybody. And actually, I think it was I think 26 out of 27 of the Brazilian like the state governors or whatever, I'm not sure what they're called there, are saying that we should do that. And so Brazil's a possibility too. And so, yeah, there's these countries all over the world that are talking about this and figuring out how they want to go about it in ways that, they weren't before. And it should really interesting to see who is the first country to do something that's actually fully universal.
Sasha, you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, if somehow, we did manage to have this kind of basic income on a global scale, it would also change like the structure of our entire economy, because you wouldn't be able to exploit the people now that are making, all kinds of cheap gadgets and all kinds of, working in dangerous mines to get all kinds of minerals that we need for our phones and, cheap food and all kinds of stuff. So it would change things a lot on a global scale if that could somehow be implemented. But of course, I think in terms of, what country is going to do it first, if any, probably they will first start off not being, your idea of this universal basic income. Probably they will be with all kinds of different measures. If you make a certain amount of money, if you file this form, if you're so-and-so, ex-employee or
it can get diluted. It could be diluted a lot in the
So,
same.
but it would be great if we saw it somehow, in this kind of, the way you see it as unconditional. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and that's what I'm pushing for. Even as we in America are starting to look at, the whatever the next bill is, and it's already. I feel the conversation has already grown to the fact that we can't just do another one-off payment. That we do need to have regular payments for a period of time to get through this. And then the debate is, where should that line be drawn? And of course, I'm arguing that there should not be a line. And if there is a line, let's say right now there's a bill being proposed by Democrats that draws the line at $150,000, and it would provide $2,000 a month to every adult. And I believe that bill is also $500 per kid, and it draws it at $150,000 the line. And so if you earn more than that, nothing for you. I think that there's a way of still doing that, and it's through the understanding of what basic income is, where instead of drawing that line, everybody gets it. But then next year, if you earned over $150,000, then you can pay that out of your taxes. You just raise the taxes on those who earned over $150,000, and you can effectively, claw that back. And so they won't be net beneficiaries. And if you do that, you don't have to go through this whole process of figuring out who should get it and who shouldn't. Everybody gets it. And then you just figure out at the back end, okay, who did so well this year that they didn't need it after all, and then we can tax that back. It makes so much more sense to do it that way. And it's a stronger policy. It's fewer people left out. It's more efficient. And I'm going to continue pushing for that understanding here in the US and also elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, also to quickly mention that it would be good for people not to forget what we want to achieve, because you can get very trapped in this taxes and money and then politics and so forth. In the end, what we want is a better life for human beings. We have some resources, and we have the people. We have to distribute them, in a better way. That's the idea here. Because if you get too trapped in this all kinds of schemes, it's going to be more about the game than about what we want to achieve in our society. So we should never forget that. Sometimes I'm a bit concerned if people are going too into such ideas. Don't matter what the ideas are. If they want to help people, but they get too trapped in the politics, what taxes, what this or that. Sometimes you have to step a bit back and say, what do we want to achieve? So let's not forget that. If UBI, it's a way for us to get resources to people right now in a very quick way because of this pandemic, then I say, okay, that would be good to try. It would be great to try it. Okay, if we can find other means, I think again we should try it. But never forget that. To me, UBI in a sense is almost like trying to get to take care of people's health, and we build a pharmacy with UBI or ambulance. It's like right now let's help them directly, no questions asked. Let's help them, let's help people. But we need to build hospitals, and we need to build research centers basically to deal with the health of the population overall, and that will be a long time plan. So that's how I see it. Whatever I'm doing at TROM, I will still do it even if I had a universal basic income. I think it will not be enough in my regards to just think that that's going to push things in the proper direction. I think I need to do something to be more vocal about the problems and the solutions and education overall. And what did you see? I was curious because you are in this environment. Do you see people who talk about universal basic income thinking that this is quite like an end goal, that it's sufficient enough that will solve many problems, or they still see it as a stepping stone maybe to build something more than that?
I mean, I think it's just, if what is utopia except it's like a horizon that you go in that direction and you never actually reach that destination. It's always something further down the road that you're striving for. And I think that, especially when it comes to basic income, it may be something, it's my focus and it's what I focus on 100% of my time, and I'm pushing for it. But I do not see it as the end all be all. It's just you get that, and then suddenly all these other options open up, and then you go for that next thing. And I think that, most people, I would think, recognize that too. Any goal that they're trying to achieve, it's not that you just stop there we improve existence, and then we figure out, okay, how we can improve it further. What is the next step after that? So it's great to be thinking about, say, the resource-based economy and ideas that are further down the road, because it's important to have that destination. And I think that UBI is that destination along the way, that we get there and then it's so much more able to reach that further destination. Because we just have a really weird belief about what money is. Like, most people don't even understand, what money is. We have a strange belief that it's like a physical thing, that it's like real, and it's not real. I like the way that Alan Watts referred to it, where he used an example of how in the Great Depression, we had that it was like that people showed up to work and to build like a house or something, and the foreman said, "I'm sorry, we're all out of inches." And it's of course it's not real. We have all the inches we need. It's a tool of measurement. And so, that's what all money is this tool of measurement that we invented to help us figure out like how to allocate resources. And there is no limit to it. There's no preventing us from making sure that there's enough inches to go around. But in the end, it is just inches, just this imaginary thing that we use to make sure that people are able to use resources and transform those resources and exchange resources with each other. So it's funny. It's like I want to emphasize that money itself is this tool of trust that we invented to help us engage with each other. And I think that by building a society built on trust instead of distrust, if we make sure that we trust in each other with access to our basic needs, then I think we're going to flourish in a way that we just wouldn't otherwise, as long as we have the society built on distrust. If we learn to trust each other, then there's so much more possible than it is right now. I think it's like a sociological achievement instead of a technological achievement that's really important for our human civilization, is just to start trusting each other and recognizing that we all have the right to what we need to live.
And when people trust each other, I've seen that usually take away these inches from the research. They take away the inches from whatever, so there are no biases, no influences, those trades away. And maybe UBI, it's a way to take those away. It's an ironic or paradoxical way of maybe giving money to take away your mind of money. Maybe I hope that can be the effect, because that's how you build trust. We're talking about social networks like Facebook and so forth. The most trusted ones are the ones that are open source and don't incentivize anyone with anything, like whatever. There are all kinds of decentralized ones. Those are the most trusted ones. Not the ones who come up with all kinds of schemes. So maybe that allows us to push us away from this kind of polluted environment. So that's what I would say. If Jenny want to say something, or others, we discussed a lot about the universal basic income, and I think you made very good points, and it's great to hear from you directly. Anyone wants to add anything?
No, it was so great to have you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invite, and it was nice having a conversation about this.
And what do you do now, Scott? You basically write articles and educate people about the universal basic income, and have speeches and this and that. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to look more at what I've done, then you can go to scottsantons.com, and I have a UBI FAQ there too that is built so that there's a lot of commonly asked questions that people can explore answers to in blog form that goes in depth into each kind of common question. And you can follow me at Scott Santons on Twitter. And I got a podcast where I do audio versions of my articles too, so that people have that option as well. And you can find that on any platform that you prefer.
I'll put them in the description of YouTube and Facebook, so people can visit. those websites. Yeah. And then you get a basic income rate, basically, with like you have a Patreon account and people support you, right?
Yeah, I have a Patreon account, patreon.com/Scott Sanson as well. And yeah, that's what enables me to do all this. And I look at it too as I'm not being paid to advocate for UBI. It's that I have the resources that enable me to advocate for UBI freely. It is something that I'm voluntarily doing. I enjoy doing it. And it's something that I'm only able to do because I have my basic needs met.
You get the cap $1,000, so you get way more than that, or how does that work for you to get a UBI from your Patreon?
What I did is I created something called the Big Patreon Creator Pledge. So it means that I pledge away my surplus above my basic income amount to others who have pledged to do the same thing. So there's a list of, there's like 30 people that have signed up to do the same thing, and I pledge as a patron to them in turn. So yeah, my amount is like this flat amount that's like a floor every month through that mechanism.
Mm-hmm. And it's enough for you to have a living. That's nice. So basically, you pay each other. You try to pay each other a UBI through this Patreon now.
Yeah. No one else has hit their goal yet, but through my helping them, then hopefully that they're closer to it, and it encourages them to and they don't have to to pledge to advocate for basic income. They can. The point of Patreon, of course, is to do whatever it is that they feel that they most want to do, and hopefully everyone on Patreon, I would prefer that they all earn enough that they can focus on those things that's important to them.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, if anyone wants to add anything, if not, we can move on and talk just a little bit about our new project. So, if anyone wants to say anything?
I come where I live. It's redneck country, and some people would say that sounds like communism, buddy.
And don't open that can of worms now, okay?
It's funny that I never hear like Republicans talk about how Alaska is a communist state, but I hear all the time that basic income is communist, which is funny. And it's funny that Milton Friedman just was not a free market communist. He is actually a pretty well known free market capitalist. So it's funny, and also there are a lot of actual socialist organizations and communist organizations that are absolutely anti-UBI. So it can be funny to share those kind of articles with those people as well. It's like, well, if you think it's communism, then please explain why communists hate the idea.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's like just play of words, because in the end, it doesn't matter. You can put labels, whatever. You should focus on what you are trying to achieve, or we're trying to achieve. So
yeah.
Okay, then we are going to move to a different topic for a bit. If you want to stay or if you want to sign off, or thank you for participating.
Yeah, I would love to stick around, but I'm actually I've already eaten into another call I needed to make, so I need to skedaddle.
No?
Okay, thanks a lot, man, and maybe you will participate in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Can I just add something before anyone leaves?
Oh, it's just me leaving too, right?
Yeah. It's just Scott leaving. It's about the universal basic income for Scott, or?
Yes, it's about basic income. If anyone needs in terms of basic income, I maybe be able to help.
Okay, like financially or what?
Yes, anyhow. Like I'm sure that we can spread the nets around, and we know people who have.
Yeah, maybe getting in contact with Scott and support him on Patreon. I don't know, or yeah,
unleash the billions.
Yeah, and
supplies.
I should mention too, actually, since the opportunity that Andrew Yang started an organization called Humanity Forward, and they've been raising money to provide micro grants directly to people. And that's been making a huge difference in people's lives here during this time. And also Give Directly is another organization that is focused on giving unconditional grants to people as well. And I think especially in this time that is the best way to help right now, is to make sure that people just get money directly that enables them to use it on whatever that they need most right now.
Okay, so you can check those.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Man.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the invite, and thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Okay, people. It's like, how many, like 4 hours now?
Only 2.5.
2.5. We can quickly talk about our new project
I'm ready
now.
to go.
Okay. So, we released a new project. It's not a TROM project or anything like that. It's more like an independent project. It's called Our Minds.online. It's easy to remember. Our Minds Online. Repeat after me. Our Minds Online. Okay. And we post there. We post like a bunch of us that you see here. We have an account there, and we post whatever our thoughts are about the world and videos and whatever we like to post there. So I think it's just I discussed this with Dima. He had this idea to make this website, and I was like, I also kind of had this idea before. I bought the domain tromblog.com, blah blah, and then we discussed, and I kind of disagree because I didn't want to review articles and this and that. But then I realized, and he also said that we shouldn't review anything. It's like, let people post whatever want to post, and it's people's responsibility now. It's like, so it's a trade-free service basically for people. And you guys are posting there. We have new posts from Jen and from Aaron and Cody and Sasha and my blog and Dima. So we also have our own websites, and then you guys can also talk about the idea if you want. But we have our own websites like theotron.com or Big Sasha Small World and no, Big World Small Sasha, and we mirror our blog posts there too. So it's like a hub. If you want to see our minds, these people who you see on TROM-Cast, you can go there and check that out. And what do you guys think about the project overall?
I like it. I like it.
A really great idea, guys.
Yeah. Microphone, Sasha. A microphone. I can hear it from here. But
I was gonna say it's great to have this collection of thoughts, and then to also have people that don't have websites like Jen, post.
Shas, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think people need to know what's on my mind, so not yet.
Well, I think you should let people know what's on your mind now with this fuckery that's happening around the world, and especially in India with the pandemic and bullshit jobs. And maybe you should take that out, man. Just take that out.
Most of the people are just trying to make it religious again. Like, it's like we don't have enough distractions already. Because what really pissed me off is after my pay cut, I went on this website and I checked, it said, find out how rich you are in the country, in India with your monthly income. And I put my monthly income in after my pay cut, and I find out I'm in the top 0.56% of monthly income earning. And I was like, how fucked up are people in my country? Like what do you guys eating? Like, only photosynthesis do you manage to survive? I mean, I make less than 500 euros a month now with my pay cut, just about. And my earning is in the top 0.5%. How fucked is everyone else?
Maybe you are in the lower end.
Wait.
Shas, you said you top 5%?
No, 0.5. 0.53.
0.5?
3, yeah, 0.53. I mean, I knew
like, how is it possible?
Before the pay cut, you were like super rich then.
You need not in a basic income.
I know. And I've been looking at all of this, and I'm on a lot of family WhatsApp groups, and you just run into people, and I mean, people just bogged down by superstition, and I have no idea what to do anymore, because the more I think, the more I talk about it with the less people actually want to hear me talk at all. So
That's why I think this blog is a great idea, because writing is a good way to inform people and just get your thoughts out. I think it's like one of our most powerful tools that we have is writing.
yeah, and I've been like very okay with my job so far, but then this whole pandemic has, because people keep talking about the economy collapsing, and what everyone is doing right now is just paying for the shit they need, if they can even get it. And if that is causing economies to collapse, what the fuck are we doing? And it just makes me think, this month I wanted to turn down my pay completely because 0.56% and whatnot, I would still make it. So I spoke to my employer and I told them, I don't want to be paid for the month of April, any work that I do. And he said, it's a good sentiment. That it's good that you're thinking about the company, but that's a decision I make, not you. And that really put things into perspective, because I feel really shitty. I don't want to be picking out fabric for some wealthy person who has not just too much. It feels I'm not doing anything useful at all, and that's been really, really irritating, and I just don't want to talk about it.
So you're out of job now?
No, I have a job. I'm still. That's what I'm telling you. I have a job that puts me on the top half of the.
Okay.
So you don't want to talk about it, huh?
This is
You
what
become super rich.
But the situation in India looks really bad. Like the way they made this lockdown and then forced so many people to like go and try to get back to their villages and stuff from big cities, and then now a lot of them are stuck in the big cities, right? And these like huge groups of people just waiting in huge lines just to get food and stuff, and it looks like a huge disaster.
Yeah.
Like,
No, see, even on a normal day, if you gave the government 100 days to plan, people would still fuck it up. But this is with no planning, and you can't just blame the government, because any government in this situation would be fucked up like this. Okay, there is a difference. There is a difference why South Korea and other Asian countries fare much better. It's just because as a culture, they're more used to discipline. Less,
they also, yeah. I mean, they also handled the situation early on. I mean, they have a much smaller population as well. They use technology, straight away. When they knew this was a problem. When I knew this was a problem in China, they tried to contain the situation early on. Whereas in India, it's like, oh my god, they made this fucking lockdown like last minute, and then because they have so many poor people, like now people are just left with nothing to eat, and no way to survive.
And these are not people like me, because I'm in the top 0.5%. These are people. I'll tell you what it is. The reality of it is like these are people who live in a 10 by 10 room, 10 foot by 10 foot. That's roughly 3 meter by 3 meter, and there are 7-8 of them there. They don't have an individual toilet. It's a shared toilet somewhere at the end of a passage that 40-50 of them use. They make around 10 euros a day if they get lucky.
Yeah, right? Now nothing.
Most of that they send back home. Okay, and these people, they don't have more than 3 or 4 sets of clothing on them at any point. 3, 4, maybe 5. And if they don't have that daily wage, why the hell will they stay in the city? I'm sorry, we can't hear this person. I think her mic is
Ziva, I think your mic's like super low right now.
How many washing machines are there?
Like in India?
Washing machine like in India. Chance probably has one. He's in the point.
It's in Sasha's apartment,
Come on, they can be in a lockdown. No, it's a serious question. Like
no,
you can be in a lockdown, but if you have 40 or 50 people using the same washing machine,
I don't think they use washing machines. In these conditions, people that live in poverty.
No, they don't have a washing machine. They are the washing machine.
Oh, at all.
Yeah.
Tune out. I'm sorry.
We may laugh about it, but I only learned to use a washing machine 20 days back. I have one now.
Oh wow.
So.
Oh wow.
It's not because I didn't have one. I was just brought up spoiled, Just before the pay cut, I was in the top 0.16%. It's just that.
But we really take for granted these kind of things, just a washing machine, it's something you grow up with, like you don't even think about not having one. No, most people don't have a fucking washing machine.
Yeah.
What do you mean most people though?
The majority of people in this planet. Yeah, because the majority are poor, really poor. Not
really,
not Europe
really
poor, but
But
not Europe poor, India poor.
Okay, sorry. Just another one. You said that you have 500 euros a month,
roughly,
and you belong to 0.53% of the richest in India.
by income, yes, household. Yeah.
Okay. So you belong to the 1% of the top.
Oh man.
He will be slashed after this.
Not at all. I do much better than that. I'm in the top 0.5%.
Yeah, right. Yeah, come on.
0.5%.
I was in the top 10 of a 1%. I just after the pay cut.
Where do you live?
Okay.
Where do you live?
Who?
You.
Me. I live at home in Chennai.
And the address?
I'm just saying, with 500 euros, it's the income is really rich, and every day, in some way, I feel like every day I go to work, I help perpetuate that in some way. I can't shake that feeling.
Yeah, of course.
What is the average income in India, though? Do you know? The average?
No, man. I mean, I have to look that up, but
I don't know. It must be very low then.
Yeah, it must be very low. I think around 40% of the people walking around make less than $3 a day.
I think that's globally as well the case.
Wow.
Yeah.
Listen, Shaz, is this statistic only during this quarantine time, or is overall statistic? I mean, about the income.
I think now they
didn't check
make
it.
nothing.
Yeah, now they make nothing. Nothing. And I don't know if it's been updated. It's a website that I go to and I just check it. I don't know if they've updated their databases or it responds as situations change, because I never really thought to check before.
Okay, so you've been in top half of the percent for the long time. It's not just recent because of the virus.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, that's if you think about the population of India, and I've also been there for a couple of weeks, and it's of course madness how the inequality is, and yeah,
that's crazy.
that's
I'm
across
shocked
the board in third world countries.
So why don't you write an article for our Minds to tell us about that? Because it could be interesting for people to know these kinds of figures to put in perspective. Like, look in India, if this guy with 500 euros a month is in 0.5%, give some links and so forth. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, at least you take your frustration or anger or whatever and just put it there. Maybe you should do that. That's why I built that tool for people to just at least express themselves and educate others. Maybe you can consider that.
Yeah, Aaron wrote a good one about Germany. So.
Yeah, Aaron wrote a good one about Germany. Yeah, because people say, Germany, of course, Germany is much better than India in that regards, of course. But still, there are lots of problems in Germany. So it's good to know such things, And maybe this guy should write about Denmark, more. So they bust some myths there about Denmark.
Our minds talking shit about every country.
Yeah.
Soon it will be blocked in each.
Yeah, right. We did it.
I don't know, man. I mean, our prime minister made us he told us to go to the balcony and go bang pots and pans, and You know what? I'm not ashamed to admit it. I actually fucking did it because I was like, I want to see how many people are going to do that.
Why? Because those are empty.
No, it's a good joke that only Romanians, only really poor Europeans and Indians will understand that joke. Because I went out there and I did it, and a police vehicle drove by, and there was this policeman with this mobile phone out, and he videotaped me, like clapping from the balcony, and I was like, is this what you're doing right now? Like, you're actually seeing how many people are clapping, and I don't get it. Instead of that, I do feel that they could have been, you normally on every day, you don't care about the 90% of the fuckers who make this inequality possible for like 1% of us. The people, the daily wage laborers, you don't give a fuck about them. You could have used this time, to at least to make sure they got home safely instead of spraying them with chemicals. There was this article I saw where police brutality is a normal thing. Okay, don't overhype it. I know you guys are used. It's totally normal. You fuck with the police, they will beat your ass. Okay, you just have to accept
it. So those videos are only shocking for us, huh? Those videos.
No,
just shocking for us, not for you.
We look at the idiots and we look at the video and we look at those idiots. They know that was going to happen and they still did it. And we're not shocked by that. The hyper-normalization of violence. And
I heard in Philippines and I think maybe in some African countries, a few people got shot because of the lockdown, like because they went outside.
Yeah, to just keep them healthy.
Yeah. I'll shoot you so you don't get the virus.
I saved your life. You'll thank me later. Maybe.
It's very interesting to see in the long run what's the implication of this, because, for example, Sweden, I was reading these days, they didn't go into a lockdown like every other country. And they're doing a bit bad in terms of that compared to Norway. But still, like, you have to compare over months period of time, because you don't know, maybe Norway, when it goes back to normality, it will have lots and lots of deaths, like maybe the same as Sweden. So who knows, maybe this lockdown may have been useful. We'll see. But definitely in poor countries, I think it also made things a lot worse for poor people.
Yeah, because now they're going to die not only of the virus, but also of starvation and all kinds of other health issues. And the health care systems aren't prepared anyway, regardless of whether you have 20 or 200 or 2,000 or 20,000 coronavirus cases.
Right.
How's the healthcare
either way,
system
they're not going to get healthcare system
in India? How is the healthcare system in India?
I don't know. It's iffy. The thing is, the government wants you to believe that it is really prepared and they're doing everything they can. One thing is for sure, that the healthcare system is cheap, okay? But it's not of the highest quality. There is a good chance that if you go to a hospital, you will contract the disease if you didn't have it, okay? It's a very, very, very good chance. You're really just better off like not meeting anyone at all. And we're definitely not equipped to handle it. On a normal day, we're not equipped to handle the shit that goes on, okay? If you go to a government hospital in India somewhere, in the city, you will find there's a good chance that there could be a body in the passage. It could be that bad. Now, imagine in very remote villages and all of that, they won't even have sanitized environments. There are places like that. And then on the other hand, you do have really, really good hospitals also, where if you go to that hospital, there's good chances that you will be cured of whatever illness, because you do have very good doctors here. It's a very mixed bag. Super expensive. Like my grandfather passed away recently, and there's a good chance. Before we took him to the shitty hospital, he went to the good hospital that was super expensive, and he was alive. And then went to the shitty hospital, and let's not blame the hospital, but he died after that. So,
how is the situation in US, Jen, for you now? Because you said that last time you updated us a bit, but how is it now?
Yeah, how is Skid Row coping?
I'm just so blown away by everything. I feel like in the United States and really all over the world, you know, a problem happens and we react as opposed to just trying to prevent the problem from getting worse. We're on a lockdown, and you know, only essential businesses are supposed to be open. Like I left for the first time in 2 weeks to go to the grocery store, and I didn't even go in the grocery store because every grocery store is just packed with people. They have like home hardware stores that are just packed with people. Like all the fast food restaurants are still open. You just can't eat in them. All of them are packed. There's like an ice cream shop down the street, had 20 cars wrapped around it and like 10 people standing outside of it. So I don't know. I just like find it peculiar. I mean, my mom, she's still working, but I read, you know, last week I think it was, they had a major outbreak at a factory similar to the one she works at. Now, just now, this week, they're making them wear masks. I mean, it's just like such a backwards, you know, they're only doing, and in my mind, I feel like they know a lot more people are infected than what we can record because not everybody's being tested. I think the last time I checked, it's like, you know, out of the 300 million people that live in the United States, we've tested like maybe like 1 million people.
Is it
It's just like what's going on.
around
So,
3
I
million?
mean, numbers are insane here. The
But
numbers
still
are
very low.
Yeah. I don't know.
But they have lots and lots of deaths in the US. Like I've seen some days they have over 2.4 thousand deaths per day. You know,
Most of the people here, I mean, that I've seen, even talking to my brother, who's a super smart guy, he's, you know, an engineer, he doesn't believe the numbers, he doesn't believe the statistics, and like the average person, from what I'm seeing on Facebook, thinks it's a conspiracy. I mean, it's
True.
It's a fuckery. It's just like they think it's like engineered. They think that the government's trying to control us with this, which makes no sense because, first of all, if it's causing such a huge collapse with the economy, that's the last thing they want. You know, it just doesn't make sense. People are not looking at it from a logical standpoint. I don't know if it's because people are so scared that they're just kind of tricking themselves into not being scared and just. I don't know. I don't know what to think, to be honest. Like, it's just such a madness.
I've heard that too in Romania. My family tells me that it's a big conspiracy that, oh no, there are not so many people dying. They're just lying. The government is lying just to keep them home and whatever the reason. Like, oh my God. You know.
Yeah. I don't know.
As if that's the last thing you may need now, you know, to just go into such conspiracies and shit like that.
Yeah, distrust of the leaders of a community is really like a symptom of a well-functioning community.
Yeah, because in the end, it's not their fault. It's like this system that allows and like gives you the reasons to doubt those motherfuckers when they're doing so many shady things, you know. But you have to draw a line sometimes because it's too nuts. You want to go quickly to the? I have some news related to these kinds of things. Just quickly. Oh, jeez. I can tell you.
The pizza place is gonna close.
Oh, that's what you're waiting for. Don't worry, then we are going to just quickly talk about.
I'm kidding. It doesn't.
Oh, I don't think you are joking. I think he's waiting for that. I want to recommend a documentary from VideoNet because we didn't do that in a while, and it's called "The Inventor Out of Blood in Silicon Valley," and it showcases very well that whatever rules you put in place, these motherfuckers are going to just completely ignore them. And it's such a brilliant documentary showcasing how this company wanted to invent a test, like a drop of blood, to detect most of the diseases out there, you know. And they lied so much, like they lied to authorities, they lied to everybody. They raised, I think, $90 billion or something like that, until they just went puff, you know. But it was a funny scene. So here's the thing: they provided these tests, you know, a drop of blood. They didn't have the machinery, So they were using other machines to do the test, but you come to their place, okay? You do the blood thing with the finger in their machine that was proprietary, and then they took you for a tour of the whatever research center, and then they took your blood and go back into the those other facilities, test that with some Samsung Philips machinery, not with their machinery, come back, put it in their machine, and then the client comes and is like, oh, your results are ready, but they're not. Their machinery was like a joke, They did no tests, basically. So they're doing tests with other machineries, but they put them back into their own machine to give you the results, And it was a big, big thing, in the US. It's the classical example, basically, of Silicon Valley. People who lie as shit.
That's genius.
Because they marketed.
Yeah.
They marketed it as this little box that, all you need is this little tiny bit of blood, and you just go, psh, and then you just have this little tiny box do 100 or 200 different tests for all kinds of diseases, but it couldn't actually do that.
Yeah, that's what it is when companies are that's why I don't quite buy the competition thing, that competition will create good things, because competition was always pushed to create just stuff to sell and make other trades, What's competition created today? iPhones, and these kinds of companies, and Google, who just tracks your data and then whatever. I don't know.
No, it's like competition. The only point of competition is to see who can come up with something that gives them an advantage over somebody else. That's it. It's to find an advantage, not solutions.
What was the name of the documentary again?
The Inventor is out for blood in Silicon Valley. It's one of the first documentaries on VideoNet, actually. If you go on documentaries, videonet.com and just documentaries. It's a long documentary. It's very good.
Theo, do you think you're going to program a feature into VideoNet where I can stream to a TV?
Oh, it's not about VideoNet though. It's about your player. Whatever player you have, you can stream on your TV.
Yeah, you could just test it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can tell you if you want.
Because I bought a TV and I want to use it.
Well, do you have only a rich? You're a rich man. You say, hey Theo, how can I stream on my big TV? No, but I will tell you. Yeah, actually, we have a projector. It's not that expensive nowadays to buy a projector, and it's worth it to see these documentaries and educate yourself, and what Ima will call as edutainment, right? To just
Exactly.
How is your edutainment?
Senior? Oh yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah. It's on second book. It's like second part of the for-profit entertainment book, and this will be about more edutainment and about solutions more. Not about the problem. I try not to make its negative, more like positive side, to come up to kind of inspire more people to do actions today. Yeah, and like the blog I made for our Minds about Adam show.
Adam
probably guys, Adam ruins everything. You probably guys.
Oh yeah.
Seen that show? Yeah. So I was researching it also for it, and it's a great example of edutainment when there's like a comedy show, but it's got really good scientific point, and they also provide the links. And actually, if you go to website, they also provide all the links from where they get their statements and information from, and you can check that. And that's like one of the good examples. And of course, I've got many more, and I do my own kind of research and project. So it will take time. But yeah, I'm working.
And you can still find that on VideoNet, by the way.
Yeah, no, I was and also linked from the post to the VideoNet.
That's nice. And what was your article, Jan, about?
I mean, I just also am noticing a lot of people that are, saying they miss their jobs, they want their jobs back, when in reality, it's like, forget the job. We need access to medical care, we need food, shelter, those things exist. And I mean, if we go into another Great Depression where lots of people are dying, I mean, obviously in other parts of the world that's already happening. And really it's been happening. Even before this pandemic, it's been happening. People's been dying all over the world because they can't access things. We just need to get this, like, this notion of jobs out of our brain. It's just so harmful. It's just so outdated. We don't need it. It's no longer a tool. It's a harmful thing to us, So I wish people just understood that better, and that's what motivated me. And I hate Facebook. I think it's just an echo chamber, and people are, But at the same time, when I get on there and see these conspiracy theories or just the things that people think and say, it really does inspire me to write about them. And I hope like you, Shas, and other people do the same, because it is important. I mean, and if anything, you learn something while you're writing too. So I don't know.
Yeah, Sam and Sophie, maybe they will also write some stuff. We'll see.
Definitely. Yeah.
We just put pressure on you now.
No pressure. You're the only ones who haven't. Okay.
Yeah, I always feel like.
Yep.
I always feel like writing is a really good way to kind of get your thoughts together, and then also make you research more and learn more. So it's a great tool to use.
We also opened a new, we curate stuff on TROM-site, tromsite.com/tools, and we put some illustrations. It's like we curate illustrations. That's really cool because one image can mean a lot. So if you go,
nice.
Yeah, I even sent you some messages. Sophie, sometimes you should read those messages, Because I was asking. Also put your stuff
So
there. I was
proud of
asking.
that. Oh my god.
Okay, go on TROM-Client, read your messages, okay? Because I was like, hey Sophie, do you know any artist that does such things? Hey Sophie,
Oh,
hey
I'm
Sophie.
sorry.
Then I made it my own.
Did you find some?
I found some really good ones.
Pavel Kuczynski?
I don't know them by
He's
name. Yeah, he's there.
He's there. Mm.
Oh, he's there.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. So it's
What
it's
about
a cool...
because there's this guy who is basically making like
Bansky?
What?
Bansky?
Oh yeah, Banksy, yeah, for sure, of course.
Banksy.
But there's this other guy who, like, how are you going to censor any of it? Because
No.
there's one guy who's really like, he's basically trying to be as provocative as possible.
Oh,
with, like,
even better. I
it's
like
like a bit pornographic, but it's really cool.
Perfect. Yeah, I like something like that. That's great. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, he's
Yes,
cool.
send me some if you know. Because we really need some.
Yeah,
You can
well.
also put your stuff there. She also does some illustrations,
It's too pornographic though, my stuff.
Your?
No, I'm kidding.
Now you made us curious.
At least we'll have some traffic there.
That's true.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly.
Now
Maybe I'll
people
be
really
the
visit
voter
us.
of that.
Hey, where is that?
He will be texting me like, "We need some more of your stuff."
Yeah,
It's like,
right, yeah.
It's going a bit slow,
Personal
Put an
request.
ass on there or something. No, I think it's a great idea, this Our Minds thing. Also because somehow, I think it's very cool to have a website, and that's like what represents you or whatever. But I do also think that some of the whole idea of that kind of goes away if you're not really interacting with other people in that, if it just kind of goes into the void and then, So I think it's really cool that we can interact with each other, especially when we, to, the larger extent, really just also agree on a lot of things, and can be also critical of each other in a good way when we share the same values,
Yeah, let's see. Anyone can post anything. Like, Cody, what's that video, man? You creeped me out.
There's two of them. Which one? The new one? You like the new one? Is it the new one?
The new one.
Fling of philosophy.
Fling of philosophy.
You want to scare us?
I mean,
Is the apocalypse coming and only Canadians know?
only the Canadians know. All right, this top secret information is contained within in the Fling of philosophy. Yes. You will learn the secrets of the polar bears and the maple syrup here.
Yeah, so you can go there, people, to
called
see all of
them one.
this. All of these goodies.
What's that you're using as your mic stand? Or is that a knife?
I thought it was just
the
right.
other part of it.
I cannot. It's easier, you know.
Just trying to look more badass, like.
I think so.
Yeah,
just
Cody, I'm jealous of Cody because he has this great mic, and I'm trying to have his own mic, but this is like €5 mic. And I asked him how much did you pay for that, and I was like, I regret asking you. I don't want any mic anymore. It's perfect.
Oh, you
fine.
don't. That $5 is fine. Yeah.
It's very comfortable, actually, like this. Actually,
Sure.
That's how I'm going to do from now on. It's very comfortable.
I can't imagine it ending in disaster.
I wanted to point out that Aaron sent me this cool website. It's corrective.org. It's in German, but it's also in English. It's this really great non-for-profit organization that is quite well known, it seems. They do all kinds of investigative journalism, and they talk a lot about trade. I like that, you know, because they don't talk about money. They talk about money, but a lot about trade, like these trade deals, and they expose all kinds of like billion-dollar like schemes of just money laundering and showcasing how, you know, laws and rules. I don't know. They kind of make any difference. So it's in the show notes of this TROM-Cast. So no, yeah, I've read a bunch to that. Sometimes I was thinking it would be super cool to take these articles that are so well made and make like a video out of them, just a video, because people will watch that more. There are so many great articles, but some people may not read articles.
Yeah, reading, nah.
Reading is for research. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of there are some news about how people take advantage of this coronavirus and with all kinds of scams and stuff like that. Like always, you know, like it's normal. And one interesting news was how the pollution, you know, is reduced now because people don't pollute anymore. We found the solution to climate change. So you can see.
Actually, I was reading today that as soon as Wuhan came back to the full power and the lockdown is over, the pollution came back. Now they have the smog again. And it was there for decades, and then during the lockdown, the sky became clear. They couldn't even see, you know, the mountains there, the Himalayas, and for like. And
why is everyone able to see that mountain range?
Oh, show your mountains.
It's a bucket huge.
Yeah. People are looking at it from everywhere. It's like, look, I can look at the Himalayas now because there's not enough pollution around.
Yeah, but not from Wuhan.
Yeah.
But not. So it shows that how it looks good at first, that, you know, the environment is going back, and the pollution is diffusing. As soon as the society start to run back, launch the factories, everything go back to normal.
Yeah.
No, it's irreversible. We need to go to Mars.
These Danish people with their ideas, you know. But it's interesting how just a month or so of just partial lockdown, not even total lockdown, you know, reduces the pollution so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, you know.
Yeah, they were saying that Germany might even hit its like climate targets.
Wow.
Because of this.
Great nation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That was a really long TROM-Cast and lots of people. I'm good. It's great to see lots of faces. Probably people just stay at home and don't know what to do and they come to TROM-Cast, huh?
That's what I do.
We don't have lives right now, Theo. That's why.
What?
TROM-Cast. Okay.
Yeah. It's like the pollution backwards for us. We get more attention now, and after the lockdown is over, it's just again, no one is interested anymore. Okay, we can just blow up this TROM-Cast.
Yeah, right.
Just light it on fire. Until the next time.
Peace out.
Bye.
Okay, guys, let's just go.
Going.
Run.